welcome. We can check the date and make sure the date. All right. To the Tuesday, March 12th meeting, the joint meeting between Finance Committee and the Norwood Board of Selectmen. We'll turn it right over to the FinCom.
So I'm just calling to order our FinCom meeting as well for this evening. And then we really only have one item on our agenda, which is the FY25 general government budget and shared expenses budget. So Mr. Mizuko, did you want to share something with us?
Sure. Budget's good, it's about $40 million. Any questions?
Yep.
So going over a couple of things, just talking about the FY25 budget, a couple of the items that we're tackling, a couple of the larger themes that we're dealing with. One of them we're going to go into in some detail is about a $500,000 increase in trash costs. That's up about 22%. This is the second year of a 5-year contract for trash. We'll talk in a minute about what that impact looks like. Health insurance is around a 10% increase. We got our final GIC rates last week. The GIC has been projecting about a 9.5% increase. That's around where we came in. The plan differentials vary a little bit. Some are a little bit less, some are a little bit high. I think as everyone knows, that's roughly a $17 million line in our budget. So when we start talking about 9.5% increases on that significant budget, it has a huge, huge impact on our overall financial picture. We are looking at the possibility of offering a health insurance buyout. We're working with the PEC, which is the bargaining framework they have to work with for health insurance changes. That being said, that will not have any relief in this year's budget necessarily, and it might take a year or more to actually implement that. Our open enrollment period is April, May, but other folks who may want to be able to switch off may have different enrollment periods, and as such, they may not be able to take advantage of it until October, November, December, January. So we do have a lot of employee interest, but what we're going to have to basically do is sort of get a guaranteed interest from employees, have enough people being willing to switch, and then that makes the buyout viable. Even if we break even, we save on the increase in costs, which would be particularly helpful for us, but nothing likely to see in this budget. We haven't had a 9% increase in health insurance in a while. It's been hovering around 5 or 6, but it has consistently been 5 or 6. So I don't know when we're going to have that magic year where it goes up 1. But it's having a significant impact in the budget. Most of the general government budgets had a roughly 10% reduction across the board in departmental expenses just to get us into that line with that 4.25% increase. This year we did build our personnel cost charts from the ground up. So we had accounting, and kudos to Molly and Megan accounting. We started over from scratch, had every department's personnel chart rebuilt, and cross-checked it with what's in Munis just to make sure we had accurate numbers. It's been a while since we've done that. We sort of had a system, and then we were sort of in Munis, but we decided to start from scratch this year to make sure we were accurate. This budget also does call through the health budget for eliminating our contribution to SNARC, which is an outside agency, as well as the St. Catherine's Nurse. I have a proposal for how we can fund them going forward if folks are interested, but they've been carried in the budget for many years, and they are outside agencies that most towns have stopped funding outside agencies. So just to talk a little bit about trash, as I talked about, it's a 22% increase. This is the largest year of the contractual increase. This year, or going into next fiscal year, I should say, we're going from roughly 226 a ton to 285 a ton for solid waste. Unfortunately, the future years aren't much better. They're slightly better. The two main components of this budget is the solid waste and the recycling. The next few years, so 26, 27, 28, you're looking at 8, 8.4, 9.28 on the solid waste side, 7.6, and roughly 8.8 and 8.8 again on the recycling side. This is all based on tonnage, and that's important to remember that we take an estimate based on the prior year's tonnage. It really does determine how much trash we're actually throwing out. It can vary quite a bit, although behaviors tend not to change en masse. We did see about a 6-7% increase in the total amount of trash people were depositing right around the start of the pandemic. It actually started off by going up about 10%. It's tapered down a little bit, but we are depositing more trash than we were 5 years ago. And largely that's because more people are working from home, more people are spending their day during home, because we saw that huge COVID spike and it just came down a little bit. So if you used to have a job in Boston where you commuted in 5 days a week, we all know we're very sustainable and we wouldn't do this, but that wrapper from your lunch went into your business's trash barrel. It's now going into your trash barrel here in town, and unfortunately it's one of the unintended consequences of the pandemic. That being said, even if that didn't happen, these costs are still somewhat unsustainable.
Yeah. Tony, excuse me, just on cost for the tonnage cost of recycling, is that much different than the cost of solid waste?
It's lower, but only by 10 to 15%. So there
Because
usually
it was pretty close the last time I looked.
We've kept it. We've been able to keep it lower, so there still is a financial
There's
incentive
still
to
an incentive,
recycle.
yeah.
That 10 or 15% differential doesn't make it a huge financial difference. Our last contract, some of you may remember, we actually had a provision that recycling wouldn't exceed the cost of trash. We were pretty
Yep.
adamant that continue. I think Waste Management realistically just moved the numbers around to say, sure, we'll have that continue. That being said, we compared, we got quotes from 2 other vendors, and we compared a number of other towns. And unfortunately, there's nobody out there that's not seeing these roughly 10% increases every year. Our first reaction with Waste Management was, nope, too high, we're going somewhere else. One company was the same, another one quoted us and then wouldn't give us a final number. They said, well, we're not gonna know until we're into the contract what a significant component would be. And it's like, we can't, first of all, we can't do that. Second of all, we wouldn't do that. And then we checked with some of the other towns, both with Waste Management and other vendors, and they're all seeing roughly the same increase. So it is an industry and a Commonwealth-wide issue, but the impact on the budget is still significant.
But, Bob, you worked on this a lot.
Yes.
Anything to add?
No, I mean, you're right, that gap between the cost per ton for trash and recycling is beginning to narrow.
Mhm.
I do believe, though, at the end of the 5 years, it will still be a higher cost for
trash.
but
I
it's
think it's about
narrowing.
15% higher. Trash is higher than recycling, so it's still cheaper to recycle than trash, but you have to recycle accurately, and we don't always do that. Sometimes the contamination rate goes high, and we lose the value, and it gets treated as trash anyway.
How does that work?
How does what work?
When we have non-recyclable stuff mixed in with our recyclable?
So we have sort of an allowance. It's understood that there's a certain level of contamination. If it perpetually goes over that, what happens first is we get some nasty grams from them and we try to work on it. But then they'll have to treat a portion of it as solid waste if they have to dispose it all as solid waste, so you just end up paying that trash cost anyway.
Okay, so that includes both the recyclables and the solids, because
Yeah.
they're mixed in together, you have to dump them.
Right. We still save money with recycling, but it's getting smaller and smaller. To put that $500,000 increase in comparison, and remember, the budget does have some cuts in it, so you have to take that into effect when you look at these numbers, but roughly, admin services, which the budget listed as total general government, but it's the portion that's really sort of town hall, if you will, our administrative services, up about $140,000. Public safety, obviously, more than half of our budget is up about $1 million. Public works, and we made some reductions here, absent the trash increase, is up $157,000. Health and human services is down, but there's a corresponding revenue loss for that, but it was otherwise roughly flat. And total culture and recreation is down, is only up $13,000. So when you take that $500,000 and look at what other functions where it could be, if that $500,000 was $100,000 instead of $500,000, look at what other options we would have. But unfortunately, it's having a significant impact on our overall budget. We're gonna jump into the individual departments. Everyone has the line item budget. I'll go through this. We do typically go through it fairly quickly, but feel free to stop me if you have any questions about a particular department, or if you wanna jump back, if we skip past it, it doesn't mean we're not gonna come back to it. So first up, and we have the line numbers here corresponding to the lines in your line item budget, is the Selectmen's office. Proposal here is to go from 2 FTEs down to 1 FTE. The overall executive suite, if you will, that includes the manager's office, the purchasing function, and the Selectmen's office. We've been tweaking it over the years, and consistent with needing to reduce the budget, the plan here would be that we have a budget analyst position in the manager's office that's going to vacate by the end of the year. We would convert that into a staff assistant, sort of a senior admin assistant, and that person would provide staff services or support to the different functions in the 3 offices. I mean, they're really one office that works together, but they would be able to back up purchasing, they would be able to back up the licensing agent in the Selectmen's office, be able to physically fill in there to cover the office for vacation and sick time, as well as provide some of the staff support to back up the managers that handle capital outlay, historic commission, and budget balancing, so.
Okay. Tony, do we have another copy of that? I know you gave it to FinCom last week, but.
We need one more?
Oh, wait, maybe,
Did you?
I got it.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry, they all look alike.
Okay,
They
I was gonna say,
do.
I have one, we can print more if we need to, I also have one, and I would just have to steal Mr. Sads if I needed it. So as I was saying, we're retooling that analyst position to be sort of an admin for the entire office to be able to provide support in a couple different areas. So the total function is going down 1 FTE, but we're restructuring a little bit just to provide some better support and to be able to accommodate sort of a more efficient system. Mr. Donnelly, anybody had a question about this, or?
No, Tony has advised us earlier. I mean, my concern was that if it's a 50% reduction in the staff supporting the selectman's office, and I was concerned that I don't believe 2 FTEs were needed, but I certainly think more than 1 is needed. And I think the plan to cross-train and have another position from an existing headcount makes sense.
Yeah, and the idea is that there's a backup there, and that's one of the challenges we sometimes have, is that we could run with less in certain areas, but then when you lose somebody, you are completely out of luck. You are stuff out of luck. So in this case, it's just a retooling to be able to adjust a little bit better to help where needed. The analyst position is helpful, but we split purchasing a few years ago. It was 2 full-time people in purchasing. We really sort of split the functions to have the admin services work and the purchasing work be separate. They kind of got melded together, and what it did is it kind of gummed up the purchasing process. So now that we've taken a step back and said, no, let's keep these functions separate, still within one office, purchasing is moving along much better and much quicker and getting better results out there. And the admin work is not getting gummed up by having to go back and do the purchasing. It was always been sort of a catch-all department for the town, but it was a catch-all department that also had to do all the procurement stuff. So it would be, hey, we've got a new project and we need to do some construction at Hawes Pool, and can you guys work on the mobilization? Sure. Oh wait, we've got to go out to bid for X, Y, and Z. So just separating those on paper has been quite efficient for us.
Excuse me, Tony.
Yep.
So, with the way that you just explained it, there is a line item under the general manager's budget, not to get to that yet, for training. There isn't one for selectmen's, but the assumption could be that that position could take advantage of those funds for training.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've always sort of looked at it as a pool,
Yeah.
even town-wide. I mean, you got to know what each department needs, and certain department has needs, but we're never going to have a situation where the treasurer says, look, we've got to send somebody to this course, and the manager's sitting on money in there. We would pay that position out of the manager's office, because the budget analyst, we have an allocation for training for that. The
Yep.
training would just change. So whatever their needs were, if it's going to MMA or there used to be a licensing association that did some training, we can still accommodate that.
Okay, I just wanted to get that on TV.
Yeah, no problem. And there's still training for the selectmen. I don't know where we pay for your training on, but we found a place every year and we'll continue to. General manager's budget is up next. No significant changes here, other than we're at the same FTE count. We are looking at restructuring a little bit. That position will likely be budget neutral. It'll probably be at a similar grade. It might even be a lower grade. We have not gone through the personnel board process yet, but it's not intended to be a management level position. It's sort of a senior admin for the office, which is equivalent to where the budget analysts were.
I mean, you noted earlier, Tony, that you made reductions in your operating expenses to be able to make the budget work. And I get that, because looking at, COLAs and, steps, is a significant increase across the board, just about in every department. And, I mean, you can do that, you can reduce operating expenses, but at some point, I mean, you're gonna need paper clips, and there's no place else you're gonna be able to take it from. So I think this is sort of a warning to you that, let's take a real close look next year and see where we stand.
Sure, we always, we go to people last, and we always look where we can go to make adjustments, because if you have if you have a position budgeted at $70,000 a year, you can't just go to them and say, well, we're gonna give you $68,000 for this year. So we always try to see what we can make more efficient in the operating budget. And that's an opportunity for departments beyond their staffing to really try to get creative with what they're gonna do and have them really analyze what they actually need. The staffing levels are a little bit more difficult, particularly in a number of departments that have just a handful of people. It's, it's one thing to take a 70-person department and go to 69 or 68. To take a 3-person department and go to 2 is a much more significant function. In the case of the selectman's office, we don't really need 2 in that individual function. We still need some support, but the functions all work together, purchasing, the manager's office and the selectman's office. I wouldn't be able to make something similar like that work with the treasurer's office or the clerk's office. You're just sort of starting to call everything. Yep.
I just want to ask a question, and this is probably because I'm the newest member of the FinCom.
No, all questions are good
But
questions.
I've seen over the last few years, the general manager's budget has increased significantly, like 41.5% from 2022 and 13% from 2023. So is that from adding in an additional purchasing person, or was this shifting between?
So there's 2 things that cover. One, the economic development position was added, I think, 2 cycles ago.
Okay.
And that's partially costed here. Also, the number that you see in like FY21, it shows 540,000, but then there's a line that says salary allocated to NLD. That number is actually those 2 numbers combined. We've stopped showing it that way in the budget. So what is 540 is really do the math on those, 615.
Okay. But it's still increased overall the general manager's office budget significantly.
Yeah, there's no headcount change. Other than when we added the ED position was 2 years ago,
Mhm.
maybe 3.
Tony, that raises the question of the cost allocations and the indirect costs and things like that. So I just want to make sure I understand this. So I know that back in FY '21 and FY '22, we were showing like negative numbers in the budget, and we stopped doing that. And now we're talking about some of those things is now showing up as revenue. But where was it showing? It didn't show up as revenue last year. So where was it showing up? Were there offsets in this budget last year?
No, so last year it went in on the recap as a revenue, but it didn't factor into the budget. So I wasn't sure what Meg did. If you look at the town meeting budget book, it shows there to get to a balanced budget and it gets treated as a revenue. It wasn't showing in the budget. Last year was where we said we're showing a full expense budget.
Okay, so when we're looking at 24 and 25, we are looking at apples to apples because they're both full expense
Yes, and
budgets.
from now on, it's always a full expense budget. The only
Okay.
time something would be booked somewhere else is if it's truly that department's cost. Because you can do it either way. DOR prefers a revenue, they don't make you do it that way. It's too complicated for us to try to figure that out every year and look at the budget and say, well, what's the budget, but it's also minus 800,000, but it's also minus this, it's also minus this. So what's that true budget? This is the budget as it is, and it'll always be this going forward. It'll have its increases and decreases. And then we're sort of separating the discussion on, or at least conceptually, we're separating the discussion on indirects because they're treated as a revenue. They will show up, call it above the line, but the budget is accurate to where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the general manager's office budget? Next up is the finance commission. Great job, coming in at about $1,300 less. We booked the cost of the audit here. We are out to bid for auditors. Best practice is you change your auditors roughly every 10 years. We've been with Markham for many, many years. We're anticipating hopefully a decrease in the contract. There's a couple of things we've historically had the auditors do that we don't need them to do anymore, including our free cash certification and recap on our balance sheet. Staff did them in-house this year. DOR was happy with them. We built that capacity in-house. And we're obviously going to continue doing that going forward. So there's less that they'll have to do for us going forward. Ms. Plaskovic, did you have a question? Nope, it's not. All right. And I know you all know this, but just for anyone, the salary line there is for the stenographer and the note keeper. That's not a stipend for finance commission members.
You didn't point that out in the last budget.
I did. I like that. Finance and accounting, we've just made some smaller adjustments here. Other than that, it's the same department it was a year ago in terms of staffing. Accounting, going back 5 or 6 years, did have a 25-hour-a-week position in it that was eliminated when we converted to Munis because some work was pushed down to the department level, necessitating eliminating the need for that position. But at some point, we may want to look at accounting staffing to let the finance director truly be the finance director and not also have to jump so much into the books. But we're going to give Jeff a year and then let us tell us how we think it is. Otherwise, been at 4 for quite a while.
On that, Tony, it looks like there's an added line for a summer position that was not there for the past couple of years. What's the plan for that?
Yeah, we've had an intern, I think 3 of the last 4 summers in the accounting office, and candidly, it just gets charged somewhere else. But we have an intern in particular that we're interested in bringing back who's studying accounting. It's rare that we actually get an accounting intern. We've had 3 or 4 years, so we knew we wanted to do it this year. We figured it's more accurate to just charge them appropriately or to budget appropriately for that seasonal help.
Okay.
Okay, if you look at the salary full-time line item,
Yep.
That's a big increase, what you said is due to step and COLA. I mean, was that also related to a change in position?
So there's one change of position included in there that wasn't reclass that wasn't included in the FY24 budget.
Mhm.
We also have the T-non group. That office is 4 staff, 3 of them are in the non-union group.
Mhm.
There's an education benefit in there that not everyone gets. It's a 5% differential if you have a master's degree. So sometimes that factors in where
Mhm.
if you have somebody at step 3 and they leave and then somebody comes in and they're step 5 plus they get that master's degree benefit, that sometimes kicks it
Yeah.
up a little bit.
Yeah, because, I mean, see something similar, with assessors also, and, that's, in general, that's much higher than you see, with typical step and typical COLA.
Sure, absolutely. Other questions on accounting? We're also, this will probably be the last year we, unpaid bills have sort of flowed through the accounting office, but it impacts the budget. And we're gonna just, we've talked with DOR about a different way to do that, so it doesn't look like it's charging to a certain budget. Going back 5 or 6 years ago, any expenses we had for a department got put into that department's budget. We stopped that process about 5 or 6 cycles ago before we went to Munis, because what would happen is, let's say the finance commission wanted to buy a new adding machine, and we'd say, okay, let's put $20,000 in there for the adding machine and the training. And then the following year, you'd have the adding machine and the training in there. The budget would get copied over and everyone would look at it, and you have these fake increases and fake decreases. We've largely stopped that. The reserve fund is an awkward, it's a catch-22. If you charge it to a department line, you'll have a more accurate line, but then you don't know what you're necessarily charging to your revolving fund. But we want the accounting budget is not responsible for unpaid bills. It's just where they've historically been charged to have a line, they get charged to, and then the money gets moved around. But that'll smooth out after this year. Assessor's budget, no significant increases here. Actually, in fact, Timmy's done a good job of decreasing it. We're entering into a recertification year. We do a recertification every 3 years. Tim's confident he can get through the year because he does a great job managing his budget, but it's always a difficult year for the assessors. This is another department that they could use support at different times of the year and throughout their cycle, but then other times not. But it's also just a 3-person department, so it's tough to, we can't merge the function with anything else. We can call all these things finance, but assessing a house, collecting excise taxes, and then actually doing our books are 3 related functions, but it's hard to find people that can help out where needed. Moving on to the treasurer's office, just a couple of things here. Some salary and COLA changes, which you'll see in every department. Banking costs, we continue to do better at banking costs. Some of you might remember we had a huge increase a few years ago. The bank that we used was bought out by Eastern Bank. Eastern Bank did not seem to care about the municipal business, was charging us a fortune. We've switched off Eastern Bank. We're using a lot more. We've moved more of our money to using local banks. We've continued to save some money. Although some of the costs in the treasurer's budget, like out of the collection agents, is actually what we pay to collect our ambulance revenue, for instance. So it's sometimes a more volatile number, and I'm frustrated with the state and our auditors because there's no other way to do that. We wish we could just take it off the cost of the ambulance billing, but we do great with ambulance billing, but then, we collect an extra $300,000, but then there's an extra $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 that we're paying. It's minimal, don't get me wrong, in terms of the overall cost, but it's a cost that tends to spike with some of those collections. There's just no other way we can realistically manage it.
I thought the collection cost was a percentage of the cost of the ambulance service.
Cost of the ambulance revenue.
Right, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. In
Right,
a year where
yeah.
we generate an extra $500,000 in ambulance
Yeah.
revenue, it's great. There's another 5%, call it $5,000 or $10,000 in collection costs that we have to pay. That's great.
Yeah.
We've made the revenue. We don't have to deal with the billing
Right,
or anything.
Right, I mean, not that I'm disagreeing with the numbers in the budget, because they're less than they have been in the past, but I would think if our ambulance revenues have gone up, then our collection rates would go up also,
Correct.
but they haven't.
No, they have. You'll
Yeah.
notice right around here, it jumped up quite a bit.
And
So
now
we're
they're
still-
down, yeah.
It was a small, just an adjustment to where we are.
Well, between this and this, that's almost half.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. This is sometimes a volatile number. It also has to do with tax sales too, but that's a smaller portion of it.
Okay.
So Tony, our banking fees are down significantly from
We've done-
a couple of fiscal years.
Yeah, and I like to say we've done well. I want to give the staff credit.
Yeah.
The bank that took over our prior bank was terrible.
Right. Okay, because we were spending almost $40,000 and we're just budgeted $9 this year, huh?
Most towns are paying very minimal for general banking services. Eastern Bank was, I don't want to keep disparaging them, but they were whacking us for everything.
You get disparaged.
Okay, they were just whacking us for everything. We never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
There's no way they still are in the municipal market after, maybe they just didn't want the business, what do I know? But we're working more with local banks,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
Nice, great.
Tony,
Yeah.
quick question on the
Yeah.
treasurer or the legal.
Yeah.
How much can somebody write a check for, a treasurer or somebody in the town of Norwood without one more signature on it?
So it has to, the process includes the accounting department, there has to be an appropriation for it. So nobody can draw a check that's not an appropriation, you have to do a purchase order, there has to be an appropriate purchase, it goes through a whole a whole process. So there's not a dollar amount per se, but you can't just cut a check. It would be fraud if somebody did.
Right, all right, just checking.
Yeah, no, good question.
Yeah,
Try and
thank you.
figure out how to do it.
It's happened before in my organization.
It has, in a lot of nonprofits and civic groups will have, two people need to sign, two people need to
Treasurer,
verify.
president,
We have a number
secretary.
of standard and beyond standard, just
All right.
typical control measures that you have, that you can't just cut a check.
Perfect.
I can't just authorize an expenditure. It goes through a purchase order process. If, depending on the amount, purchasing reviews it, accounting reviews it. It then goes to the treasurer's office. There has to be a corresponding budget line, so we can't just cut checks without anything. There has to be an appropriation for it. So there's quite a number of checks and balances in the process. Town council lines, again, up as it continues to go up every year as we're trying to get a little bit closer to average. I think we're doing better than we have in the past. This is a contractual year. We're trending okay with council, but we still have 8 more contracts to settle or complete the settling process, so that'll take some time. We're relying a little bit less on labor council this time. We don't necessarily need them at the table, but sometimes it's just a function of where you are and what you're trying to negotiate. We continue to increase this line every year to get to the point where we maybe don't need to transfer numbers. One of the items that we pay for is council at the airport. And we started doing that after, I think most of you are familiar with the, there was a suit a few years ago. We went with Expert Aviation Council after that. Their costs have been high. They've now come down as the airport has hit a good level. Can't think of a good airport joke, Bob. You gotta, Bob will come up.
We'll work on it.
We'll work on it, okay. As the airport, as the plane has leveled or whatnot, those costs have come down.
Costs are not taking off.
Yeah.
How's that?
All right, yeah. Costs are not taking off the way they were the first couple of years.
So that was
They've
okay.
come down in a way, but we'll probably continue to adjust this. We've only had, I think, 2 legal expense increases in the last 3 or 4 years. Murphy Hesse's not had one in a while. They're our base labor contract, and I think Labor Council and the Aviation Council have gone up each once since we've had them. But I could be wrong on those numbers.
I mean, do we periodically go out for an RFP for outside counsel?
So we did about 5 or 6 years ago, and we brought a bunch of firms in. It's exempt from procurement in that you're not, you don't have to go for the lowest price counsel. Most of these firms, especially those doing municipal work, are all generally in the same realm. So somebody might come in and say, well, you're paying $285 an hour, we'll do it for $275 an hour. But is it worth it changing just for the $10 an hour? It's treated under the same branch of procurement that.
Yeah, but I guess what
engineers
my
and
question
architects
is,
are.
is it the town's intention, or is it a standard in this town or any town to periodically go out for outside counsel?
So
RFP?
we're actually the opposite.
For
Most-
auditors.
What's that?
Like for auditors.
With, you should probably look at replacing your labor council every 10 years, just because you've gone through 3 bargaining cycles. Most towns actually don't until a lawyer retires. Norwood's unique in that 5 or 6 years ago, we interviewed for town council and labor council, kept Murphy Hesse for town council, and swapped out our labor council. There's only a handful of firms that do municipal council and labor council, and then for things like aviation council, there's 2 firms in the country, so you can take the one based in Massachusetts or the one based in San Francisco. Some of the other specialty work that we do, there's not a whole lot of firms that do it. The board could certainly want to look at changing council, but that's not likely to be a financial win one way or the other for the town. But we haven't brought town council in a while and
We,
interviewed
I
them.
don't think we haven't received anything from them asking for a rate this year.
No, so let's just not,
But
nobody tell them.
But you've reduced it.
So the number where it's gone down is just trying to get to, that's the Murphy Hesse base contract that we have. So that's our retainer, I guess, is we're trying to get to the retainer with them, and we've locked that out as, this is our retainer for Murphy Hesse, the general, hey, we have an agenda, can we post it this way, council retainer.
So this is showing, a reduction on the retainer, but then an increase in the legal expenses. So, like line 86 is up by 11,000 and then line 87 is down by 6,500. But when you go up ahead in the planning department and you look at line 152, there was $5,000 in legal expenses there. That's now been zeroed out, and it says it's been added to this line. So, do we really think we can live within this budget? It seems like it's basically flat, if you consider
So
kind of where everything's coming in.
that line in the planning department wasn't getting used. It was just getting charged, because it's Murphy Hesse that we use, so it's all getting charged to the same place, so it was eliminate that. We're flat with where we were a few years ago. We've had a couple of spikes. It depends on how much we want to go up, and then do we want to have more money that we need. And do we want to just stably increase it a certain amount every year to get to where we do? And again, some of the outside counsel we use, the costs are coming down. It's a catch-22.
We reduced in the assessor's office as well.
Yeah, that's counsel. It's really expert assessing counsel that really does specialty and technical work for them.
That's people that are basically applying for rebates and everything and handling that.
But we're now
We're now below what we've spent
for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
We're going into a reval year. So once you've ended a certain number of your revals, you're going to reval year. It may need to come up in a year or two, but Timmy's been working on them as your abatements start to drop over time. You can always spend more money on council. It's just about trying to balance what we're budgeting and trying to let folks know that there's a limit to what we're doing. And of course, the complexity of what goes on in any given year adds to those costs, or doesn't add to those costs.
I don't think anyone is advocating that we call the attorneys more frequently and have them charge more time. I think we're looking for a realistic budget that we can actually live within.
Sure. Other questions on legal counsel? Human resources, salary changes are reflecting in this budget a increase of 1 FTE. Budget balancing, as everyone knows, doesn't discuss or doesn't usually get into whether or not to add positions. There was some discussion about, as HR is shared more between the town and the schools and some of the challenges that that field is particularly having, would we want to add a position above and beyond the 4.25% that the budget was programmed in at? Budget balancing did vote to move that forward. At the end of the day, majority of our costs being personnel, HR helps manage those costs. HR in some cases helps bring down the labor council costs when HR can intervene and handle an issue instead of having to send it to labor council. We prefer to use them as a process check more at the end of the process or at the beginning of the process rather than have them doing a lot of it for us. So this would add another generalist to the pool, likely to focus on recruitment so we can centralize recruitment in one position, but it makes sure that we've got some additional backup in the office, because right now if we lose somebody, a lot of things just grind to a halt in the HR office. Those of you who have been on the personnel board in the past or were in the past know that the school department's always been able to use HR. They're using it more, which is a good thing. Lisa's been working quite a bit more with the school department, but we're facing the same employment challenges that a lot of other folks are facing in a number of industries. FMLA for health-related reasons, injuries related to a variety of reasons are all very time-consuming processes. They're very important, but we're seeing a huge increase in those. Hiring is not what it used to be. We've had certain positions that are good positions, $80,000, $90,000 a year, that we're pretty much offering to people a year or two out of college, and they're saying, in hindsight, we just don't want it. So what used to be post a job, get a bunch of applicants, and have a good pool, we actually have to be much more proactive in recruiting. Now the challenge with that for police, fire, and teachers, people don't just decide to do that. It's not that somebody was doing accounting over here and they can jump into the accounting office. You can make that switch. Somebody who is an accountant can't just decide to be a teacher all of a sudden. They can't just decide to be a cop or a firefighter all of a sudden. So that need for proactive recruitment is becoming difficult. At the more entry level of the spectrum, things like special ed bus drivers, cafeteria workers, those positions are very hard to find. We can't find lifeguards. And some of this is that salary adjustments need to be made, but it's not like it was in the past. I think an example of that's the DPW lottery that probably Mr. Plasko's the only selectman that remembers. We used to have to do a lottery for DPW jobs because we got so many people who wanted a summer DPW job. Even before the pandemic, we have whatever we budget 16 slots and 18 kids would put in. We know they all don't stay, so it's like, what are we gonna, you're gonna exclude 2 kids that you're gonna call back. So anyway, that is to say recruitment is not as easy as it used to be, and this position will play an important role in that, as well as dealing with a lot of the, I would say personnel challenges, but I really want to phrase them as more human challenges that we're seeing in the workplace.
At the end of the day, so you're adding one more FTE. What's the FTE complement going to be for the staff after this staff is added?
So it goes to 4 for HR. So there's the director, the assistant director, the 2 generalists. We're adding a generalist. There's some part-time staff in the office, but they're non-benefited part-time staff.
Okay, now, as we discussed in budget balancing, were you able to make any other offsets in other areas of your budget to make up for the cost of this one individual?
We went and had made a couple of small reductions in other areas to drop the cost, and we're likely not going to have anybody on board until September or so.
Tony,
But then you have to pay them next year too. So.
Right.
But you are reducing the staff in the selectmen's office.
Yeah, so it's all functions wide, flat.
Mhm.
I know a few months back, maybe a year or so back, there was kind of a salary study, right? So does that have something to do with this rather significant increase in the human resources salary head?
Education.
Department head?
Sure, education difference and coming in a different place in the step scale. There's probably, most of the general government step scale, it's maybe a 21 to 24% differential where somebody is on the scale. When Molly left, she was probably only step 3, maybe step 4. I'd have to double check. Lisa came in at a much higher step.
How many steps do the typical general government positions have? How many steps are there?
So with the T-non group, I think it's gone to 10 steps. It used to be 7. And the other unions are a little bit different. I think like police and fire don't really have steps in the same way. It's roughly a 3% increase in steps, but there's some differences based on union contracts. So that's why I say it's you could have roughly a 25% differential from the starting step to the ending step.
Is the HR department head a union position?
No,
Okay.
no, God no.
All right, well, that's where we're talking about steps here.
Yeah,
And you
no-
were saying that the steps for the union contracts.
Well,
so I was just
I was
confused.
just in general talking about it. No, the we call it the T-non group, or the town non-union and management group.
Okay.
There's 10 steps. Most of the clerical contract, I believe, is 7. I'd have to check. DPW has less steps. Police and fire have less steps. They tend to be larger.
Okay, thank you.
But your management staff have steps,
Yes.
and they tend to reflect the same step levels as the union groups, basically, the 3%, or is it?
Closest to the clerical group, because again, the DPW group and public safety are just, it's very different. Other questions on the HR department? Moving on to information technology, anticipating some reductions here. We're gonna be, we're finally through our Google conversion. We'll never be finally through our Munis conversion. But with some changes, we are gonna be able to shed some smaller software packages. And there have been some that you have to kind of carry for a couple of years, or you carry over a year. So we're gonna reduce what we're carrying. There's a little bit of a drop in the department head cost. Mr. Redlick did retire in February. We anticipate having a new IT director on board. We are in mid-April or March, probably sometime by the beginning of April.
Tony, there was one line item here that I was confused by. I think it's 113, data processing. It's down 6%, but then there's a note that says data processing servicing costs are increasing.
So there was a Munis module that we're not going with. So that was a decrease because we said we're not going to be able to use this. It was an asset management model that we're just not going to be able to use. So the costs are going up, but we're just not going to be able to implement that module in any reasonable amount of time. The accounting office and Sue Bartlett from the light department spent some time working with the auditors over the summer on our asset list that gets submitted to look at our total value, and it's a mess. We've been carrying the software for a while. Like, yep, we're going to do the Tyler asset management. We're not going to do it in any reasonable amount of time.
So does that explain why, if I look at the total operating expenses for that, for IT, the recommended budget for FY '25 is actually less than our actual expenses for FY '23. Do we think that's realistic?
We're cutting out a couple of software packages.
Okay.
We had
If you're cutting them out, how are you replacing them?
so we used a couple of years ago, not Diligent, the Israeli company, I can't remember their name. We started using them during the pandemic, and it was like, hey, for $5,000 you can get our it was like social media listing software. We did that, and then the cost ballooned, and and it was last year we said, we're done with this. Went up to like $30,000 for, I can't remember the name of the company, but we've gotten rid of them. So that's an example of something, we were using them for a while. It was sometime late last year that we just decided we're done with them.
But not replacing them?
No, it was not bad software. It was too expensive for what they wanted, and that's the problem with some of these vendors is they come in. It's either a great introductory rate, or it's just they all seem to want $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000. For some reason, there's so much investment in tech companies that are selling to municipalities that the ICMA conference now has people going around looking at the different software vendors as investment opportunities. And like, we never used to get that, nobody cared about like municipal software, but it's gotten too big. Stuff like ClearGov that does like a budget front-facing page, used to be like, great, you pay $7,000 or $8,000 and you get this great software, and now they're $40,000 or $50,000, and it's just, some of the stuff is becoming too expensive.
So what are we going to use instead of these people?
So there's things we're not gonna do. So we used to use a software that did social media listening, we're just not doing that anymore, there's no need to do it. We used to have to carry, with Google, for instance, for the first year we were on Google, we were still carrying licenses for GoToMeeting as we had a transition. So that's an example of, we no longer need that particular transition, we don't need the additional software. Plus, as you know, new department heads come in, they take a look at what's going on, find different vendors, and find some efficiencies. Some of the one Munis package that we decided to get rid of, we just never were doing it, and we're not going to do it, at least not in any reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Other questions on IT? Moving on to the town clerk budget. We have both town clerk and the elections and registration budgets. Couple of changes here. One to note, this is an example of call it a capital project in the budget. The clerk's office does need to buy a ballot scanner. There'll be a cost in next year's budget for the ongoing maintenance of that. The clerk's office now has poll pads, which they've largely gotten through grants. There'll probably need to be a line in the budget to make sure that those are getting replaced, but this is an example of a department where $3,000 or $4,000, it's capital, do we want to call it an operating expense? It's not going to go to capital outlay necessarily. We'll need ballot machines every 10 years, that'll go to capital outlay, because by the time we're ready to do it again, that's probably a $40,000 or $50,000 expense. But we're calling it capital because it's a big investment for this department, it's really not. It's not a large number overall.
This, the 3,500?
Yeah.
I mean, showing my ignorance, what is a ballot scanner?
It's literally the thing that, so with early voting, all that gets scanned in. So there's
Okay.
actually a scan of all the early ballots.
Okay.
And is the increase in the salary line item the same explanation as the others? I mean,
So-
that's a fair 14.5% increase. I mean.
For the department head, right?
Mhm.
This is a position that was in line for a reclass before the class and comp study. It got skipped in the class and comp study, and then we had to come back to it. Because this is a position that's not allowed to retire. So there'll never be anyone new in there. It's a very small note, the clerk's budget overall and the elections budget overall is not that significant. We may need to increase the stipend we pay for poll workers at some point in time, just because we don't have a problem with it yet. But I can tell you there are a lot of other towns that actually shut down their town hall on election day because they have to just direct staff to run ballots. We're still fortunate, we have a lot of people that are willing to do it. If you've ever done it before, it's probably a 14-hour day for which you get paid, probably works out to less than minimum wage. So it's not that there's we're never gonna be able to pay enough to financially incentivize people, but at some point, we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. Our costs are also going up with the variety of early voting and mail-in voting that we're doing. We haven't seen in our experience, made off the experience of other cities and towns, we're not seeing an increase in overall volume. We're just seeing an increase in the overall amount of work the clerk's office has to do, and then the cost of mailing that out. One of the items we're looking at, not that we have any control over it, but I think we got a request for, last I checked, it was 400 or 500 early ballots for our mail-in ballots for the local election. And something tells us, based on our experience, we're not gonna get that many mailed in. Hopefully we do. We actually had a pretty good turnout rate for the primary, so hopefully that bodes well. But everything that gets mailed out comes with additional printing costs, additional mailing costs. That being said, the overall clerk's budget is not so significant that absorbing those costs year to year is not gonna put us in the hole. It's not trash.
I have a question on, under the conferences on 160.
Yeah.
And I'm 99% sure I spoke to this on last year, but last year there was a significant increase from 23, and now you went down a little bit, but how many people are going to conferences, and are they local or are they far away?
So that's.
And I'm talking in general.
In general, it's a hard question to answer. Everyone does some sort of training.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are conferences that are out of state, sometimes they're in state. One example I always give is the state's purchasing courses. There's 3 of them in sequence. They're $700 a piece, and they're either online or in Boston, or sometimes they offer them somewhere else. Then there's conferences that are 3 or 4 days and they're only $700, but they're out of state. The clerk's office generally is gonna be in-house training, in-state training. I don't think we've gone to any of the regional or the national clerks associations. Sometimes that ends up being just a department head difference, but it varies by department.
And how many, and what level of employee goes?
It all varies. I mean, sometimes it's department head, sometimes it's mid-level staff, sometimes it's entry-level staff. Each department manages their budget to what they think is the best. Some conferences are designed more for a wider audience, and a lot of the national associations have moved towards that way, where it used to be just, DPW directors went, well, now there's, it's a little bit wider. The National Parks and Rec Association is an example where it's really for all Parks and Rec professionals. So sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 from rec that go there. ICMA 20 years ago was just a managers conference. It's now for general municipal management and administration.
If you sent a manager and that manager comes back and shares the information,
Yeah, I don't ever believe in nickel and diming professional development and training. When you look at the cost of employing someone, and that we're not gonna spend that extra little percentage to make sure they have the best training available, the best information available, that they can go and learn that, I don't think that's worth shortening it. When you look at a bare minimum, you're looking at $100,000 to employ an entry level. Even an admin assistant or a DPW guy at the base salary, once you factor in the benefits, the pension and everything else, it's a fortune to employ them. If another $1,000 or $2,000 in professional development is making sure that they're getting the best training they can get, worth its weight in gold and then some.
okay? I still think that there's a little bit too much money in those accounts for that. And I believe in training. I have a personnel background. I managed people. I was, in charge of their training. But what I did in the outside world, not in the town, was that I came back and I taught my employees what I learned. And we were very restricted in what we could do. And that wasn't just one company, it was many companies that I had worked for. And that was part of our job, was to go to the conferences and to bring back the information.
And we still do that. It's just the idea that and it's not that we send everyone to everything, but the idea that, okay, only one person go and come back and share it. If other people have the desire to go and get that professional development and get that training, it's worth its weight in gold. Because that's usually an indication that they're interested in doing their job better, that they're interested in learning more, and sometimes they're interested in moving up, which is something we want. Maybe they move on to another town and that happens, but we want rather a really good employee for a short period of time than a mediocre employee for a long period of time. But the point is well taken.
I wasn't mediocre.
You were the exception. You were the one who was trusted to go and to bring all that back. So if I had all Ann Haley's, that would be a little different.
Okay.
I don't necessarily, so. That would be a great job, the one person we send to all the conferences to come back and train everyone. Or raise his hand. All right, I'm trying to use Texas if I can. Community Development Department. No significant changes. Here, we've made some budget adjustments and some budget reductions, but the staffing is consistent with where it's been. I'm sorry if I'm sitting in front of there. Staffing is consistent where it's been. This is an example where, again, sometimes having the master's degree benefit, and who has a master's degree in this particular department can make, there's 3 employees eligible for it, so that's upwards of a 15% differential that may or may not be there.
Tony, MPO expenses?
So we pay $7,000, I think it's $7,000
Can you just
a year.
define it?
Yeah, it's the Metropolitan Planning Organization,
Okay,
which
yeah.
manages federal transportation dollars. We actually pay for a representative in conjunction with a number of other towns. It's always been one of these things that's just kind of come out of a budget wherever, and we finally said, you know what, it's $7,000. If we're going to pay it, it needs to be in the budget for our sort of paid advocacy, if you will, with the MPO.
I already made a question of that when you talked about outside organizations.
That's a fair point. This is sort of paying somebody to, the arrangement's been around for a long time, we're paying somebody to
We used
represent us
to, we used to
for it.
pay it, we got, used to tie it to economic development.
Yeah.
And we had a fund from Hampton Inn, and we were spending that down. And I don't know how many years ago now, it could be as many as 8. That budget was just about depleted, and the planning director at the time said he had money in his budget, and that's how it got into this budget. It's been there ever since. Whether it should be, whether we want to do something else, but that's how it got to this budget.
Okay.
And then the economic development miscellaneous is just, it really, that probably should be in the manager's budget, come to think of it, but when we started the economic development position, we used to pay for any economic development related expenses out of the planning budget. But our economic development staff wanted a, understandably his own budget for some of the items that he works on. It could go anywhere where it is, but we've always historically, as Bill said, paid for those functions out of that department. Otherwise, it's a fairly small department. That being said, I will, I point this out almost every year. When I worked for the town of Adams, we had a line in the community development budget well north of $100,000 a year for engineering and design and feasibility and grant matches, and that's not something that we necessarily do. At some point, we'd love to get there. There's 50 million other things we'd love to get to, but sometimes to get grant funding, being able to kick a project off with feasibility money and to say, hey, we've got some money, we're going to do a $30,000 feasibility study, and that way that's going to let us go access grant funding. It's not a bad thing to do. That being said, it's probably number 22 on a list of priorities, but it's there. Top 25. Moving on to the annual town report, huge splash there, $325. We're actually going to take a real deep dive into the town report this year. The printer said part of the cost is how much we include in the town report. So we're just going to have a group conversation about how much should we be including in the town report. They are great historical documents, and I always have to remind everyone we sort of prepare them to be read 50 years from now, not to necessarily be read now. That being said, there's a lot of narrative in the town report that may not necessarily need to be in there.
Tony, just a quick question. Are we going back and printing like second edition copies of one during the
No,
year?
we'll print it off the website if you need one.
Okay.
We've been reducing how many we physically print every
That's
year.
it, yeah.
If somebody said I really would like one, we can print a copy for it.
Okay.
We still don't want to move completely away from the hard copies
Yeah,
at some
that's
point.
a
I
good
think there's
idea.
actually a bit, I think we're actually required to. I think there's a bill.
Unless they change the law, you are, yeah.
Yeah, that might actually allow you to only do digital ones. I'm still not 100% sure we would do that, but it's also $3,000, so.
Yeah, and then not a lot of money. Yeah, got it.
General government, this is sort of a catch-all for a number of other general government items. We've increased the salary line a little bit for weights and measures. We've been having somebody in-house take it, but it used to be, it was part of the building department's responsibilities. It was sort of moved out of them. We have to adjust the wage scale, the price scale for it. So starting July 1st, there'll be a different wage scale for it. We've been out there doing the inspections. We can collect revenue for it. So the revenue will largely offset the cost. This is an example of something that you could handle through a revolving fund if you wanted to. But how complicated do we want things to be when it's a $5,000 to $10,000 stipend for somebody to just go and be able to collect it? A number of other towns have joined with the county in a regional arrangement, but we looked at it and that didn't make sense for us, and the cost was gonna be too high because of our size. So we've got 1.5 staff certified to do it now. One of those people is retiring, so we're gonna find somebody else to certify and do it. Great part-time or retiree gig if anyone's looking for one, but you do have to list heavy gas cans. This budget also eliminates SNARC, which is the South Norfolk ARC, which is an outside agency that we have historically provided funding to. It's a medium-sized nonprofit. They do provide services in town. We do it under the guise of a contract for those services, but that's really just to make it legal. Most towns in Norfolk County have stopped funding the ARC, as most towns around the state have stopped funding their local ARC, because it is truly an outside agency that doesn't have a direct contract or a direct connection. They do provide a service here, but there are many nonprofits that provide a service in town. This, along with the St. Catherine's nurse, if everyone was desired to give them more notice or find a way to keep them, we could allocate a certain amount of free cash and say, look, we've put aside enough money for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and after that, you're out the door, as an option if we wanted to smooth that out.
There's twice in my tenure here in the Board of Selectmen that I've almost been tarred and feathered out of town. One was when we talked about putting the police and fire department in Hennessy Field. And the second one was when we tried to cut arcs funding. So good luck. Get ready.
I was on the school committee. I've been nearly tarred and feathered way more than twice.
Well,
Yeah.
just as by way of example, the school department wants us to look at trying to see how we can fund the CFCE grant. And there might, I think I have a solution for that, as long as no one asks me what it is. But that's a service that it's a town employee providing direct services to residents. So if we're saying no to that because we don't have the money, but we're continuing to fund outside agencies that, yes, provide a service, but there's not that direct connection. It's a tough decision, but that's what we have to do with budgets, is sometimes make hard decisions that, do we want to fund outside agencies?
The use of, how many people use SNARK?
So they could get us their numbers on, and they have in the past, it's maybe been a couple of years since we've asked them, they've come in, they've met with the board. It serves a number of residents, but it would serve those residents either way. It's sort of just an additional contribution that the ARCs look for from their local cities and towns.
They would cover those residents because it's part of their
Mission.
territory.
Mhm.
But if they don't have enough money, obviously they cut services just like anybody else.
Right.
Yeah, under item 180, which is town meeting expenses, you have a reduction this fiscal year, and given the fact that it seems as if town meeting is increasing, if nothing else, I mean, you feel comfortable with that number?
I think so. That's mostly for our mailing and our other expenses. We've been able to sort of get a hold on that a little bit. I would suspect, so let's say we did this calendar year, we'll do 27 nights starting next week. And then we'll probably do 2 in the fall and 2 in the fall. So a typical season, typical
That'll
year should
just
be
be for the
6.
kennel.
So it's built roughly around 6 to 7 town meetings a year.
Mhm.
But we've been able to kind of get that
Okay.
under control.
Right.
Now, what we don't budget for that could be a challenge is somebody calling a special town meeting that we didn't anticipate for. But again, not outside the context of it. Just as the election budget doesn't contain money if there was an additional ballot election, or I think as everyone knows, depending on when somebody leaves a seat, we may or may not have to have an election to fill it. We generally don't budget for that. We certainly could, but I think as everyone knows, what happens is, let's put $20,000 in the clerk's budget for unforeseen elections and town meetings. 5 years go by, we don't use it, we cut it out of the budget instead of cutting something else, and then it happens the next year.
Tony, on the nurse at St. Catherine's, is there any insights from public health, the director, in terms of?
Sure, we can talk about it now. We're just going to discuss it in the health department. They recognize it's a unique arrangement. There's certainly some value to it. It's a unique arrangement that most towns have long since ended these arrangements. The idea being that there are a lot of Norwood kids in the school, so providing that funding is important to make sure that there's a public health presence, if you will, but it is funding to a third-party agency that is not statutorily required. There are a number of things, regardless of whether a student is in public or private school, that we have to pay for and we have to provide. So in a year where we're facing some unprecedented cost increases, we are spending a significant amount of reserves, and we're actually reducing services in some area. Is it time to finally say, perhaps we can't fund outside agencies? With the understanding that they, won't get a whole lot of notice, and if there's a desire among the community to still do something, maybe it's something we can put up some free cash for and look at every couple of years, depending on what everyone's desire is.
We're only paying for half the time that person is there, correct?
Correct. We basically cut them a check for 50% of the salary.
Right, and because we had done that as we tried to get rid of this years ago, and that's when it changed to 50% of the salary.
So maybe allocating a certain amount of money for a couple of years, or not paying it all at once, might be the sort of last stutter step of, okay, this is X more years, but once this is out, you're sort of on your own. The other thing is, maybe it should be a separate request to town meeting, specifically because you're sort of having a general government department budget for an expense that it's a good thing, but the health department pays for half the nurse at St. Catherine's. I don't. If we're gonna reduce things, it's the outside agencies that you usually start reducing first.
I have no.
Jumping into the police budget, mostly driven by contractual increases in the police budget. We did make some reductions in the operating budget. This is a rare year for the police department where, as of July 1st, we're gonna have, I believe, 6 new officers. So we generally don't get the benefit of higher down savings in the sense that the school does, because you have such a large workforce of the same type of position. But with the number of new officers that we're gonna have, newer officers, when they start, don't actually get their education incentive, which is a significant portion of their compensation until they've been with us for 6 months. So if you look at that general salary line, it's only up about 2%. That will not happen in perpetuity. Prepare that to be 5 next year. But it's a rare case where we have a roughly 10% of the department is starting right at the bottom of the scale.
Tony, that does
Yep.
kind of beg the question that I was gonna ask is that, you know, we're looking at total salary line item up almost 4.5%. And in order to get down to our target number, that means we're, you know, cutting a whole bunch of expenses by 10%. But I was wondering, you know, that isn't sustainable in the long term. We can't, you know, keep offsetting
Sure.
indefinitely. And if these numbers assume 6 new officers who are then going to see a step increase and a COLA increase, and like, you know, this.
You can expect a larger increase next year, so that's it looks good, but it's just like higher downs at the school department where, great, the budget's gone down, it is gonna go up next year. One of the things in a perfect world that we would do is budget all of our positions at the top step, so that way your salary budget is if you are fully staffed at the full step. The problem is, when you do that math out, it's a significant amount of money that we would need to do. If the town looks at an override down the road, you might be able to look at that and see what that number would be, because the benefit to doing it and absorbing that cost, if you never go back, because the problem is that somebody's always gonna say, well, I need $10,000, so let's just put Billy at step 5, not step 6. But the benefit with that is you get a much more stable budget, so you would know that a 2% COLA is gonna cost you 2%. Instead of somebody says, what's the impact on the main salary line of the police department budget of 2%? I have no earthly idea, because there's 60 different officers, all at different steps, all at different things. But again, because of Prop 2.5, we don't have the flexibility to say, well, worst case scenario longevity could be $300,000, so just build it into the budget and you never have to worry about it, and it just goes up 2% again. So do I expect that 2.18 number to go up to probably 5.18 next year, or 6.18? The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes.
And then, you know, we're talking about COLA, we're talking about, you know, contracts and things like that. The last time, 3 years ago, when all the contracts were up and we were budgeting, there was a line item somewhere in the budget of like a COLA reserve that was kind of like, we know increases are coming, but the contracts haven't been settled. What's the status of the contracts, and what's the thinking this year?
Sure, so we've settled with the fire union, and that's settled and done. The police we have TDA with, and the board will be looking at that one by the end of the month. So public safety will be wrapped up by the end of this month, and we anticipate AFSCME being wrapped up by the end of April. And we built into the base budgets the projected COLA based on having already settled with public safety.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if we're in arbitration in September, I'll have to come back and tell you, but we're not anticipating that at this point in time. Sarah?
Okay, so based on 6 new hires, I'm looking just at some of the other reductions you've made to the budget.
Yep.
I'm just, something as simple as uniforms is down, and you have new hires, and I mean, I know that.
That line's the regular maintenance of uniforms.
Okay, we're gonna have to have some new, and then, I guess my other question is the training. It looks like there's been could someone explain to me the difference between salary, tuition allowance, and officer training? So, or training school, I guess, because one's down by 15, but then the tuition allowance is up by 62,000. So I'm just trying to understand.
AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, so if it's in the salary category, that's what we're paying somebody while they're at a training.
Okay.
The other
Right.
one is the cost of the training.
Okay.
I had a selectman in Adams who used to say, one's the pencil and the other's the pusher, which is the best way I've ever heard to describe the difference between the personnel cost and the salary cost. But as I, you know, if I'm being paid to be at training on Wednesday, not just something where we pull something in off the road,
Yeah.
but sending somebody to a week-long training, that gets costed to that tuition allowance line. That language has been there for a million years.
Yeah, I know.
Could probably change, but.
Okay.
So is that up significantly due to the anticipated new hires, or due to contracts?
They'll likely go through a lot more training in their first few years than they will in subsequent years.
On fleet replacement, is this for the program for replacing patrol cars, or is this something
It
different?
is, so we moved that line, you're talking about the
That's my
capital
question.
line, 221. We moved that to the shared cost where we
Okay.
put all of our vehicles in one line.
Correct.
Well, there's several lines, but in
Got
one
it.
section.
Okay. Is that the same for the utilities and the heat that we're seeing?
Yeah, they'll eventually fall off when they're not there, but the public safety building and some of those are all in facilities, the facilities budget.
So the facilities line for heat, water, that's
That's town line.
all out of the general government put into, okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Are we arresting less people?
I wish. What's the specific question? That's kind of a loaded question. We are arresting less people because there's less crime in
We're
town.
cutting the budget for meals.
Oh, some of these were just, we have to be more efficient and get through more with less, and the police department's done a great job doing more with.
Water and crackers is good.
Water and
Cheap
crackers.
too.
We still doing Burger King?
No fries.
No, especially no supersizing it, but geez, now I'm dating myself with that. Chief, you're here, and I suspect we won't have you at this meeting next year. Anything you'd like to say? I mean, you're welcome to come to next year's budget meetings.
I think I'm tied up. No, I'd just like to thank, the board and town leadership and the FinCom, who's always been very kind to the police department, quite frankly. I know it's a big chunk of the pie, but you've always been very good to us, and that has allowed us to properly equip our people and properly train our people, and I think you see the product on the street. I hope you do, that you get quality police service. But it all starts with the support of town leaders such as yourself, so I appreciate that. My previous 18 years, and then my last 12 years as chief, I really appreciate the support.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, service.
Moving on to the fire department, which Chief Bailey has 26 years before he can retire. A larger increase here, but again, the department has matured a little bit, so you don't see that necessarily savings of higher down. We've built in our contractual obligations into here, and consistent with the salary and wage tables that we rebuilt for everyone, we once again started at scratch with the fire department. Accounting did a great job to make sure we have an accurate reflection of the regular costs of the fire department.
Tony, we obviously are seeing some significant increases here in EMT pay and career incentive. I think I've got those lined up right. I really should have brought a ruler.
Yeah, it's hard.
You too. Okay. They're not huge dollar amounts, but they're very large percentage increases.
Yep.
And I'm just curious about kind of, it says that we're talking about, collective bargaining agreement. So when did this go into effect, and how is this going to increase year over year?
Sure, so it's a combination of a couple things. It would be in effect as of July 1st. The paramedic stipend that folks get paid is not increasing a significant amount in the next contract. However, a paramedic riding the ambulance, it's around a 16% stipend.
Correct.
So if you have somebody who is not willing to ride the ambulance, they can move between class and they decide they want to. It goes from like 5 to 16. We're also slowly but surely bringing on more paramedics, not a total amount more. I think we had 2 in school last year, 2 in school this year. So when you get somebody who wasn't a paramedic or wasn't riding, then we bring a paramedic in, which eventually we need to get to the point where we're all paramedics. That's where the genesis of that increase is. The career incentive is an increase to the education incentive that firefighters receive. It's getting close to what the police get. It's not quite there yet, and it won't quite be there for a while. But similar to the police, it was bargained in an agreement to leave civil service. So I know Boston, I think, paid like 7% to get out of civil service. We agreed on an education incentive change. Right now, I think just under half the department, or maybe 32 out of 60, actually have a degree, a 4-year degree or a master's degree. So I'd expect it to grow over time, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Are we still having a problem recruiting paramedics?
Yes, sir, we are, which is why we're looking to exit civil service, hopefully as of July 1st, and that will make our hiring and retention, our hiring and recruitment significantly easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, if I wanted to take, because Walpole's non-civil service, so if I want to hire a paramedic who's been in Walpole for 15 years, he or she needs to go, take the civil service test, get a grade on the civil service test, wait for the test to actually come out, by the way, because it's every 2 years, has to come out. Then I can hire them, and they go to the bottom of the seniority list, and you're supposed to in civil service, they go to the bottom of the pay and the benefit list, which means I'm not able to recruit paramedics. Once we're out of civil service, I can steal people from Walpole, and I think I've proven I'm pretty good at that. Or anywhere else, if they're a paramedic, we can actually just hire a paramedic. We could offer a signing bonus for paramedics, and when you think about, it's hard enough on the police side where they have to send somebody to the academy for a period of time. If we hire somebody who's just a basic EMT, and we have to send them to the fire academy, and then we have to send them to paramedic school, it's 2 or 3 years we're paying their salary and benefits before they can actually do the job that we need them to do.
Yeah.
So getting out of civil service, even though we pay something to get out of civil service, and we did the same thing on the police side, when you look at paying somebody for 3 years before they can actually do the job we need them to do, because being a paramedic is a very specific skill set. It's a very challenging skill set. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary and benefits on employees who can't actually do the job we need, no fault of their own, and it takes them years to get there. So getting out of civil service, if I could actually hire paramedics, the actual savings you're talking about, probably $250,000 per paramedic if I don't have to send them to the academy and to paramedic school.
Okay, so what's the issue with, leaving civil service?
There is no issue. The union has agreed to work with us on exiting civil
Oh,
service.
good, okay.
There has
Similar
been.
to the,
There is no more.
Yeah, there's no more. Similar to the police department did it, 9 years ago, 12 years ago?
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Okay, good.
So,
One
Yep.
other question, Tony, on the substitution line.
Yeah.
So we're now budgeting $950,000, which is down $50,000 from FY 24's budget. And the note here says budgeting closer to actuals, but of course, if we look back at FY 23, we were actually at 1.2 million, and we all know that there was a significant issue, and we all had to go to town meeting and
Yeah.
address this. So, do we have data that's showing that substitutions this year are running lower than that?
we have some retirements that have been filled with new officers. So where the number's gonna fall in, it's always tough to predict. Last year was an anomaly. I think some of that 1.2 number included, there was some retro costs included in that. It's just the number ballooned, and I don't think it was all that one cost. So going forward, 950 is more than we've spent in the 2 prior years. Salary costs are up. It still seems to be a better average. The 1.2 is a more of an anomaly. If you trend it out over 3 to 5 years, we're still in the ballpark of where we're averaging.
Given that we still don't have a hospital and won't for the foreseeable future, do you feel comfortable with your overtime and recall numbers?
Yes. It's tough, but yes. It's hard to predict. And that's not to say there's not an impact on the overall budget, and that's not to say there's an impact particularly on our equipment and our people, but
Yeah, do we have an idea of the year-to-date on that?
I was just gonna ask that,
we can
yeah.
pull that.
Okay, just because it's flat for next year, but like Alan, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Chief, anything to add?
No, not this time.
Moving on
That was a
to,
good answer.
yeah. Building department, again, a couple of changes here, partially due to certifications. The level that the commissioner and the assistant are certified at impacts their payment. The building department is, of course, experiencing some record work and growth. And it's otherwise still the same overall staffing level, other than we are using our part-timers more than we have in the past, obviously, given the overall just general level of construction. Gary was telling me his goal was to get his budget, to get the permit revenue to be, his goal was 20 times what his budget's expenses were. And I said, if it's anything other than 25, I'm not gonna be happy. But we know that 12 to $15 million in permits is not gonna happen consistently.
Do we ever, I'm gonna say advertise, to people in the town what they need to pull for, to be able to do different things to their home?
I don't know that we proactively advertise, like, here's a list of things you need permits for, because
Yeah.
it's complicated based on the work that you're doing. There's also a difference between work you do in your house versus having a contractor do work. So I don't know how we could really message, here's everything you would or wouldn't need a permit for. And candidly, by putting that message out there, some people are gonna say, oh, it said I didn't need a permit to fix my deck. And then what happens is they fix their deck and add 20 feet to it, and they think it's the same thing. So I don't think we do. I don't know if we would necessarily get anything out of that. You can always call the building department. However, if you're hiring a contractor, it's really your contractor's responsibility to make sure that they're following all applicable state laws. We don't make the building code. We do make our zoning code, but the building code is the building code. We have had a problem in particular with a couple of pool companies that have come in and they're not actually contractors, and they go to Alan and they say, Alan, you want to build a pool? He says yes. They show him a pretty picture and he says, it looks good, you guys will take care of everything. They say yes, and then they're actually not looking at, we do have a zoning bylaw that has some control. We had somebody build a pool over an easement. They're just not looking at what they're supposed to be doing, because there's really, I could go out and sell you a pool, and then we're having a little problem with that in a couple of cases. But you feel bad for the residents who turn around and pay what they assume is a regular contractor, but a pool sales company. They turn around, they pay them some money, and then they find out there's a big problem, and it's like, you could have called us and asked, and your contractor should have, but they just chose not to.
Mhm.
Gary has been very aggressive in zoning enforcement and in building enforcement as well.
All right. No, it's just, I had been thinking about this, Tom and I had had some discussions over the years, and like, how many people actually know that they should pull a permit, and that's
Everyone
what-
should know. You've needed permits for 75 years, it's the rule.
There's new
You can-
homeowners, coming up, and,
We gotta probably keep
They
going.
can call.
keep short.
okay, sorry.
Emergency management, just a small change here on the emergency management budget. Minimal. We still do not have a full-time emergency management director. At some point, looking at that would be a good thing. But again, this continues to be a maintenance budget for that function.
Any consideration to sharing that with other communities?
So the challenge would be, let's say I called a neighboring town and said, let's share an emergency management director. If we have a shared emergency,
Where's she, right, yeah.
I'm
okay.
important, not the other town, so it's kind of
Never
like sharing a
mind.
police chief. I wouldn't, we don't need 28 police chiefs in Norfolk County, but I'm not giving somebody else my chief. But good idea. Street lighting is a sort of not contractually, but the light department calculates the number, and it's been flat for a while. The traffic control and fire alarm budget down a little bit. That tends to oscillate based on where we are repairing and replacing traffic control devices, which are our mast arms. Moving on to public works and engineering. Salary cost increases in the public works, some increases in the operating budgets. One of the positions, I think, in engineering was one of the ones that was skipped in the class and comp study and had to come back because they had a request in just before we started it. And unfortunately, it was a little late for some of those employees. We are reducing the overall amount of money we're spending on roads. Again, we had to make general reductions to the budget to hit our target. DPW, similar to facilities, is starting to see inflationary cost increases. Usually that takes a couple of years because most of our products are on contracts, and it takes time for that to hit. Other than that, DPW is not up a significant amount. We did, so if you go back 6 years, the DPW salaries budget was always a mess, and it was just everything sort of thrown into one, and nothing really lined up. We first went to Munis, which meant we had to kind of clean it up once. We then pulled out water and sewer, we had to clean it out again, and then accounting spent an inordinate amount of time really trying to clean it up this time to make sure it's accurate. We did decide to fold the parks salaries into the general highway salaries, because it's really just a paper distinction. You could argue, it doesn't really operate as a separate division, so it's not like water and sewer where there's a clear distinction. There's no change there, other than we're just gonna stop calling them parks employees, because we don't staff or manage them that way.
Yeah, on snow and ice, why did you go up to almost 34,000 as opposed to just a nominal amount? Because I know you have to go up a nominal amount every year to be able to, overstep the budget if in case we have a
It was based
bad
mainly,
year.
yeah, it was based mainly on the salt contract and the increase in our contractors. It's you could argue we shouldn't have to do it because of the winters we've been having, but we don't want to fall into the same trap we did a while ago where we're just so off.
No, I mean, I know you
What
have-
the number should actually be, honestly, we have not
I
had
mean,
a
I-
normal winter in a couple of years.
I mean, I know it has to be a higher number than the year before, but,
You think it could have been lower than?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, why don't you just,
13%.
yeah, why don't you just do it, why don't you go up a couple of grand rather than 33,000? That's my question.
Yeah, we could. It's one of those sort of, what's the risk and the reward? We only go up a little bit, we only go up a little bit, then we have a bad winter and we're off $800,000. Now, to that point, is that $30,000 gonna help?
Not gonna make any difference
But
at all.
I'd hate to get to the next override and say, we also need to increase snow and ice because we totally started increasing it. We've already kind of pulled back on the roads, so it's a balance. It's like, we know we have to do the snow and ice. Let's make sure we're trying to keep something
Right,
in
I'm
there.
just saying, there's a chance to put 30 grand someplace back else in the, back, in
Well,
other
especially
parts of the
since
budget,
these-
so, but that's, whatever.
What's that?
Especially since all these total up to more than what BBC agreed to.
Yeah, I'm
And
gonna
it's
have to-
more than the HR.
I'm gonna have to look into
position.
what the
It's
differential is.
115,000, so.
Mhm.
On the highway construction, so
Yep.
line 346.
Yep.
The chapter 90 money is separate, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is part of the number that we had added some during the override, right?
Yep.
And so, but now I can't remember exactly what the number was
The
that we
override
added.
was $300,000, and then there was a 250 plus something. We added 250 one year, then the override added 300, and there was an existing paving line.
Okay, so we're keeping it more or less flat, kind of, from where it was. I mean, it's going down a little bit this year, but is that gonna fit in with our capital outlay plan for,
We can, yeah, we
improving
can
roads
make
and
it
things?
work. where are we going in 5 years? If I'm cutting $50,000 a year for 5 years, we're gonna start falling back. But we're making it work. Our road bid just came in for this year, and we're again right around where we should be. So we haven't realistically felt that inflationary increase. It's been there a little bit, but we've still been getting great road bids, and we're getting a good contract this year. It's a one-year solution. Next year, where are we? It can't continue to go down about that amount, but we can make an adjustment down. We want to talk more about trash. I did sort of cover it at the beginning because
No.
it's the.
Does the FinCom
No
have
trash.
questions about trash?
It's too depressing, just go.
Cemetery and parks maintenance. Cemetery, we were able to correct a budgeting issue where we've had a long-term injury that has been out and impacting the department. That has been rectified for next year. We added in the cost of the mower. I know we're cutting things, but every year we're going to capital outlay for a mower, and every year nobody's happy that we need to go for a mower. That has been factored in for the mower, which at $14,000 it realistically should be. The board will probably be looking at cemetery fee increases before the end of the year. The airport is leveling off. I don't know, Bob's better at puns than I am. Just small changes to the airport, really just looking at necessary reductions, and Mark Raymond doing a great job really diving into his budget and seeing what he needs. Some point down the road, we could talk about this being an enterprise fund, but I think there's really no benefit or cost one way or the other.
I think it is important to say that it has trended the last few years as to having a surplus as opposed to a deficit, pretty consistently over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
But you don't have all costs of the town in there.
No, like the legal cost, and like we'd have to look at the benefits. I know Bob's
All the money
analysis
we
is.
put towards the grants and things.
Yeah, we'd have to look at that. You'd probably never be whole in the capital and that
I
sort
mean,
of.
those aren't huge numbers either, but they're
Yeah.
not in there.
Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
question. Does it become worth the machinations of doing it and saying, oh, wait a minute, we can get a $20 million grant if we put $1 million in, but it doesn't have the fund balance? Where we want to go with that is
I
challenging.
think our grant monies are they're getting smaller year by year. I think Mark has explained to me that FAA and DOT are probably paying a little more attention to other airports that haven't got the attention we have from capital.
Northern Maine Regional Airport just got $20 million for a terminal, so.
Mhm.
Health Department, no significant changes other than the elimination of the St. Catherine's nurse, which is a $36,000 annual contract. This will be the last fiscal year of our shared animal control arrangement with Walpole. That is not making anyone happy, so I think that agreement is gonna expire on June 30th.
So we'll still have animal control needs, right? So what does that mean?
Sorry, we had been, we brought on a third person and shared with Walpole. We're down to 2 positions. We're not bringing a third person back because we're just, I think they've actually already hired somebody. We're not billing them and we're not providing the service. It just, operationally, we were in 2 very different places. We tried it, not working.
So going forward next year, there's no shared services between the two towns?
No.
Coverage
The
wise?
biggest challenge that we faced was, it actually has to do with roadkill. Animal control, the DPW in Norwood, one of the great things they do a lot of good things, they take care of roadkill. In other towns, they call the animal control officer. It's just 2 different models in terms of how much you're calling out your animal control officer, and they had a bargain with their DPW. It just doesn't work. Council on Aging, a nominal increase here, again, small department. Next year or 2, we'll probably need to look at overall part-time driver salaries as we continue to expand the senior medical transport program. But we're also gonna look into asking for donations from some of the medical offices that we're visiting regularly, letting them know that their patients are getting there on our dime, and they can certainly donate if they want to. Questions on COA?
So I know vehicle maintenance isn't that big, but it's all related to, how many vans or cars are we currently operating?
So we have the big van, and then it's 3 vehicles.
3 vehicles.
One of them is electric from
The latest one.
Yep.
yeah.
And how many part-time drivers do we have for that?
They're part-time and per diem. I'd have to get you the number, but they're not regularly scheduled to work X hours. It's just we hire as many as we can to try to fill the slots. They're mostly retirees. Also a great job for retirees if you're interested. Veteran services, so this appears as a decrease, but I always caution everyone that we bring it in line with what we've spent. The state reimburses us 75% of the direct veterans cost, So that comes out in the following year in terms of how much aid we receive from the state for veteran services. So it's a cash decrease, but the actual aid will adjust to it. It's also a commodity expense. We try to come up with a rational budget based on what we spent. New veterans come into town, we have to offer the service. There's no point where we say, sorry, we've tapped out on the budget, you're not able to make a difference, you're not able to receive services. So we haven't needed to come back for a reserve transfer in 5 or 6 years. Always a possibility. Again, one person isn't necessarily eligible for that much aid. That one client coming on would make a huge difference, but a change in adding 5 or 10 could make a difference.
Yeah, for a number of years, we did an increase to them on a regular basis.
Yep,
So it's
and
good
it's
that we
kind of-
haven't done it.
Corrected down the other way, but
Mhm.
1 or 2 people move in, things could change.
Mhm.
If we're okay, moving on to library. Same thing.
Excuse me?
Yep.
On the veteran services,
Yep.
the direct relief and then the other one.
Yep.
Where we had, this is the 2024 budget we're looking at, and we're going back down. Yes, I understand that you just had said that, but that was a significant raise that we had given them in the 24 budget. Do you remember why?
What line?
462.
462. Why would we have given them such a?
Probably brought it to
Huge
the
number.
average of those 3 years, but I'd have to double check. Maybe it was higher than it needed to be.
Do you
I-
have probably no idea how much has been spent.
No, but what I'm curious is, these are what the actuals were. We may have looked at what the budgeted was when we made the FY '24 number.
Okay. I'd just like to know where they are now.
Okay, we can pull that for you. No significant changes at the library other than restoring. They've always had a $12,000 equipment line. We eliminated it last year. They are in need of it, so we are restoring that.
Isn't there some talk about some major rehab work that's gonna be necessary at the library?
It's possible. We were worried a couple of years ago there would be, and the situation hasn't changed much. So I think facilities has just finished up an existing conditions report. I'll check in with where they are, but wouldn't impact the operating budget. That'd be a capital.
No, I know that, but I mean, there's something that we should keep
Well,
in
we
the
wanted to
back
paint
of
the
our
library, and
mind.
there was some water damage, so the thought was, let's make sure we know
Yeah.
what we're doing before we spend a lot of money painting
Yeah.
the building. But that water damage also hasn't gotten worse or changed. Now, I say that, you wait next week, there's gonna be a flood, but.
20 minutes.
Going back to Ann's question, for the direct relief for veterans, the FY '23 budget was also 160,000. So the number didn't jump up in FY '24, it
Oh.
actually jumped up in FY '23, but then we didn't spend it all.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions on the library?
With the library, we were looking at the roofing, right, also, besides?
Yeah, we decided to do an existing conditions report of the building. We didn't wanna we didn't wanna paint the building unless we knew what the problem was. We don't wanna fix the roof if it's actually a foundation problem or a window problem.
And have we gotten that information back?
Facilities, I think, might have a draft copy back. I'll get back to you.
Okay. 'Cause that's gone on a couple of years.
Yep. Recreation, some costs decreasing with Oswald being offline and some general reductions in the budget that John has been able to find. Otherwise, we are status quo with recreation. They're helping out the general budget this year.
With recreation, they've taken on extended day, but that is funded through a revolving fund.
Yeah, that's gonna be its own revolving fund, completely separate. And if there are indirects that we do down the road for that, same thing, it's gonna show as a revenue somewhere, not in the base recreation budget.
Okay. In the seasonal, we said the projected cost increase due to step and COLA. Just a question, we're gonna be down one pool this summer, so we still expect that type of increase, will be less lifeguards, I would assume?
We're still, the seasonal staff are on a pay scale just like everyone else, and we're at or near minimum wage, so there's a, personnel board has a plan where those salaries are gonna continue to go up year by year.
Wouldn't we anticipate having a little bit less seasonal help this year?
Yes, I don't know if the lifeguards are booked in that line though.
They be in temp services summer?
I think so. I'll double check I'll get back on exactly where they're booked, but, and what gets paid out of the revolving fund and what doesn't. But the camp,
Seasonal.
that might be camp programs too.
Seasonal. Aren't they booked under the seasonal?
They don't know.
No, one is and one isn't. All right, small increase to the celebrations line to cover the increasing cost of events. This is another area where we are probably gonna have to see an increase each year to make sure we're continuing to maintain the variety of community events that we do. Certainly throwing another $100,000 at it would solve it for the next 20 years, but we're gonna have to work on being a little bit more incremental in some of these items.
I'm sorry, can we just go back to rec
Oh,
department
yeah,
for
sorry.
1 second? Nope, it's okay, and I don't mean to be a pest about this,
Nope.
but last summer we had an awful lot of trouble with Father Mac's pool. Do we feel like it's at a condition where we'll be able to, it was closed a lot last summer, so we've reduced maintenance. I just worry that with the increased usage that we're gonna see up there, I'm not sure I'm necessarily,
So we have some in-house maintenance staff that get hired as part of it. We won't have to put any of that effort onto Hawes Pool. Will Father Max last indefinitely? No, it's an aging, the pool's actually in decent shape.
yeah.
The rest of the facilities are-
filtration system is the issue.
Right, and the bathrooms, everything, it's very old.
Yep.
It's very, it is limping along, and we will continue to
I'd just
limp
be
it
worried
along.
about the maintenance accounts, quite honestly, for the summer.
Good point.
I just,
That being said, that's supposed to cover really the routine and regular maintenance and smaller emergencies. It's something we'd come back for a reserve fund transfer if all of a sudden there was a $30,000 break in it. It's gonna get used more, but we didn't use it during COVID, so it's not really an answer as much as it's an old pool and it's subject to
I
breaking down.
just know we struggled a lot last summer.
I predict struggling this summer too.
Okay.
You're not allowed to reference COVID anymore.
Yeah.
There's a moratorium.
Any questions on the celebrations line? Would you like me to go into all the things that I'm crying that we don't get?
Yeah.
Sure.
Why don't you save it?
Yeah, next week.
I can send you a detailed email if you'd like.
Well, I think FinCom would really like to
We-
talk about
we
this.
would like,
If
yes.
the Board of Selectmen needs to go upstairs, then that's okay, but I think that our review of this $40+ million of spending is really important.
Well, that's what we're not spending though.
Yeah.
Well, it all ties in.
Yeah, and I mean, we have some appointments, so I don't know if that makes sense to just,
Yeah, the FinCom can continue to
Yeah.
discuss. Well, I think we have a 7:30 liquor hearing.
yeah.
No, it should be a brief meeting, it's a change of,
Change of managers or
Yeah.
I
something.
can
Yeah.
sit with the
Yeah.
FinCom for a few minutes if you want to head upstairs and,
That,
that
that
works.
would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That.
Thank you.
Thank you, FinCom members. Go get them.
Dealership names.
oh, yeah, that won't be,
FinCom.
and the guy was, that won't be too long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny, Alan, everybody.
Okay,
We'll see you up there.
see you, Mike.
I'll see you.
Bye. Have a good meeting.
Excellent.
See you all soon.
Megan, the shot's fine the way it is. What? That shot's fine the way it is. Okay.
So you want to start going through a couple of these items?
Yes, please.
And then more a discussion point than anything. Obviously, we've reduced our road construction funds a little bit. We can get through this year. Where are we next year is the question. Is it gonna go down another $50,000, another $100,000? We have to keep an eye on it, and that's why you have to sort of follow the story of your budget of where it's going, and every year you have to make tough decisions, but we wanna be cautious of it. Now, software costs are increasing and acquiring new software is becoming difficult. The days of getting the $7,000 software packages to do something are long gone. There's still occasionally some industry software out there. I think we switched to the rec software and it's like a $5,000 package. It's pretty much becoming that everything is $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for simple software. I'm not talking about our complicated ERP system. So at some point, it's something we've got to work with the school department and work with the light department and see what options are out there, because we want to buy 2 pieces of software and it's $70,000. It's just not working anymore. We're finding cheap alternatives. We're finding good software. We don't want to buy the cheapest, but it's just getting expensive to buy simple stuff. And what happens is these companies continue to get bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold. So you have Bob's Minutes company, right? And you have a great deal on the software that you use. 5 years after it's been bought and sold 15 times, they want to charge you $38,000, and it's just, what do? Sometimes you're stuck. Sometimes you say, screw it. Facilities have had flat staffing since inception. We're good where we are. It's just always something to keep in mind. We do know that the Coakley will lead to some increases in facility staffing, but that's probably just a custodian or two, and that's just the needs of a new building. We're not gonna be able to cut facility staffing anywhere else as a result of that. The elementary schools will still need 2 custodians. But we'd originally had this idea that we were gonna build facilities and then sort of go to phase 2, if you will, where we might have project manager, in-house architect, in-house engineer. We haven't done that yet. There may not be a need to, but just keep it in mind that we're not quite there yet. But,
I mean, Paul said part of the problem he has with staffing is that he has an aging staff.
that's a concern as well. You know, in a perfect world, if we hired a couple of custodians that were float custodians that we knew we could have and they just filled in here and there, that would be helpful, that would be good, that would be a great system. We have some per diem custodians you can bring in, but it's not the same as somebody who's full-time and working for us. That being said, show me where the money is to hire 4 more custodians and have that float system. It is one of the departments that we are hiring people closer to the natural retirement age than we do in other departments, which is a little unique. A lot of the community events that we do rely on some form of fundraising. We're trying to address that. We're not gonna get there all in one year. Whether it's the concerts, we've budgeted for a couple of the pumpkin float and other things. We wanna do these things. They have a great value for what you spend, but most of them are under budgeted or relying on some form of donations. The fireworks at Norwood Day is an example that's always donated every year. Now, we got the donation this year, even though we're not doing the fireworks until the middle school is up and running, or at least not under as much construction as it is currently. But that person decides not to donate, there's no fireworks that year. Doesn't mean we have to fund them, but we're not fully funded in a lot of these areas. The 4th of July parade still relies on a lot of donations, and those donations are getting tougher and tougher. We're fortunate that we still have local banks that like to give a certain amount of money, that we have local business owners, but some of the people who are consistently funding these events, the Peter Catneses of the world, the David Spiegels of the world, they're also aging and at some point are gonna retire somewhere else, and we do rely quite a bit on that. We continue to try to build the legal services budget. This year, I'm doing a little bit more of the bargaining without the need for labor counsel. That'll save us a little bit of money. The airport was largely what was unbudgeted as of a few years ago, and those numbers did spike. But I can tell you, once we get it to the number where we want it to be, then we're not gonna spend $200,000 of it. But I mentioned professional services earlier. That's money for engineering, design, feasibility that we generally don't book in the budget. We're not gonna get there this year or next year, but at some point, if we do have some financial flexibility in the future, it's a good item to have. Even on the school side, everyone understandably sometimes will criticize the school department and say, oh, you want $40,000 for study, can't you find that? The answer is yes. On July 1st, if that was the one thing they had to find, they could find it and do it. One thing. You have no flexibility, and once you've committed to that one thing, you've done that one thing and that's it, and you're nervous to commit all your money at the start of the year. That might be something that we address down the road and just say, what do we want money for it? For the capital plan in a perfect world, I'd love to put up $500,000 a year for design, feasibility, so that way we could always be working on things and say, you know what? We did a feasibility on the roof at the library, it came back terrible, we better change what we're doing. But again, we don't have the money to be able to do it all at once.
So, excuse me, we used to have, what was it, the BBC? But, no.
No,
The
PVCC.
Yeah.
The Permanent Building
Permanent
Committee.
Still
Building
have the
Committee.
BBC.
Would that help?
Not at all.
They depended on consultants,
Yeah,
whenever
they
they
just-
had to have any, you know,
It was a different
anything
committee managing
significantly
it, that's
done.
all.
Okay.
And again, some of those would fall into capital projects, but it'd be nice to almost be able to get it before we go to capital outlay and say, can we spend $30,000 on a study? Well, it came back at $2 million, we don't wanna do it. Sometimes you're gonna study something and decide you don't wanna do it, but we have no flexibility within the year to be able to actually look at it. Or to the point of the library or any other building, hey, we got a leak, we have money to fix the leak generally, we have money to bring somebody in to look at it. We don't have the flexibility to say, it's time to look at this comprehensively. It's like, nope, you better wait for a town meeting, wait for the year to close, see where we are. I mentioned inflationary increases are really starting to hit facilities and public works because most of our contracts sort of come on and come off, and we're usually contracted for sometimes 3 years, sometimes more. We're starting to see that in some areas. Utility costs, we run our own electric company, have not been bad. We haven't had an electric rate increase in 5 years. We're gonna have a rate adjustment soon. It shouldn't hit our municipal account too well. There might be some that too bad. So there might be some that go up and other ones that go down. But that's an example of there are some inflationary pressures starting to hit those budgets. In terms of staff needs, because we always do have this discussion, we still don't have a full-time emergency management director. I might be able to rearrange public safety staff to sort of steal somebody for a period of time. to get somebody on loan, but we don't have a full-time person really building out those functions, and that's an important need.
Is this what Bernie used to do under his,
It is, but Bernie was not a full-time emergency management director
No.
either, so we still do the functions, we update our plans, we do some planning, we still have a team. It's not the same as somebody who's actually properly going to all the training, doing all the coordination. Having our own light department makes things a little bit easier for us in terms of an emergency response, because it's one thing we don't have to worry about. We know that there's an emergency here, we're gonna be able to get the power back on. But it does sometimes fall between the waysides that we don't have a full-time person actually focusing on developing our training, developing our managing, developing the interoperability for an actual emergency. We're not talking about public safety or we're not talking about police or fire. We're talking
Right.
about flood, earthquake, mass evacuation, things like that. That we have plans, we train, we do it, but it doesn't sit in one person's lap who that's all they do.
Do most towns have one?
Our size, it's not uncommon.
Okay.
Especially, remember, we're 31,000 census
It's
population.
during the day.
Huge
Yeah, I
daytime
getcha.
population, but also the number of big things that can catch fire and go boom in town is different than,
That's very reassuring, thank you. Thank you.
Chief,
Chief, I have full confidence in you, not him.
But it would be a good add. We don't have anyone focusing entirely on solid waste or recycling. We did used to have a 20-hour-a-week recycling position. For different reasons, it didn't work and it was eliminated. It's a now roughly $3 million cost center in our budget without a full-time manager. That doesn't mean you need one. That being said, our DPW director / town engineer / trash director does great at it, but maybe somebody full-time focusing on that or even part-time might help us with some of those costs, doing some of that education and doing some of that outreach. Again, give me $20 million and we'll fill all these positions and have no problems. If there is another general override in the next 10 years, DPW duties have expanded without additional staff. It's hard to peg what a DPW staffing study would look like. Most people don't do them. You do them for water and sewer. But that department has continued to take on more and more as time has gone on, and their staffing really hasn't changed around that. And we can always use more IT staff. Both the town and the schools, I think, run very tight ships with their IT. 10 more people and we can put them all to good work.
Well, and I think IT is the kind of thing that they can help make everyone else more efficient.
Yeah. Similar to HR, similar to accounting. There's areas we don't invest in that if we did, things would be a lot more efficient. What's tough for us is you can't always point to that savings in the budget. So 4 more IT people, we might be able to say, well, we don't need to contract out these 2 services, but it's $30,000, but the world works so much better with we do it. Same thing with HR. It's hard to say, well, we add more HR staff, aren't we gonna save money in the budget? You don't know what you're not saving by not having a MCAD complaint or a lawsuit or some other issue that HR is able to handle. So none of these have made it into the budget for this year. That being said, they're all things that we're doing without that would be good. On the horizon, FY26 and beyond, the master plan committee is meeting and starting their work. That'll be a 2-year process until they're done. There may be initiatives out of that come with funding or the need to develop funding. Now, the master plan is not going to say, we think that it's very important that you replace the blinds in the FinCom room for $5,000, but it may come out saying we should look at creating a redevelopment authority and finding funding for it. It may come out saying that we need a new municipal building somewhere and we need to find funding for that. Or there are going to be zoning changes and we should look at X infrastructure. Those things could come out of the master plan, and if we want to put the plan into effect, there might be some costs that come through that. We talked about the Coakley and increased facilities department staffing, as well as some school staffing as a result of the Coakley. That might shake out in a couple of years once we're fully in there. Remember, these things usually take a couple of years that we sort of throw all the kids in there and everything's a little hectic for the first year, and it'll get a little bit better, and there might be savings that come over time, but again, that might be 5 positions over 7 years that we don't need to fill that are not going to solve an immediate need in any given budget. We continue to have capital needs, including eventually addressing some of our aging buildings like Town Hall,
Elementary
downtown.
schools.
What's that?
Elementary schools.
The elementary schools are perfect and nothing needs to change with them.
Okay.
But the downtown streetscapes, at some point in the next decade, we're gonna have to look at. The board is taking a hard look at the potential of the stormwater fee to address the enormous backlog in stormwater infrastructure that we have, to see if we can comprehensively solve that problem once and for all, at least on the other side of it. In terms of the positive side, Moderna continues to go gangbusters. FM's campus is going to continue to, that is going to generate a significant amount of revenue when it's up and running. and it's gonna redefine the look of Route 1. The next 10 to 15 years, I really think that's what you're gonna start to see Route 1 look like, because folks are gonna see this Fortune 500 company that is at the cutting edge of their industry built what will be their C-suite in one of their, they have 3 global headquarters, one in London, one in Singapore, and one in Norwood. And as I told everyone, their chief executive officer lives in Westwood. I don't think forever he's going to continue to drive past a $500 million building to Johnson, Rhode Island, but everyone kind of giggles and says, don't say that, Tony, when I say that to them. But I think it's going to be their C-suite here. So we're now the seat of a Fortune 500 company that has been in town for 70 years and continue to invest. So that's a positive thing. We talked about Norwood Hospital at the last meeting. I'm convinced the hospital is going to get rebuilt. It is going to get open. It's taking 75,000 years longer than anyone wanted it to, but I still think there is light at the end of the tunnel. I was there the night the hospital closed, and I will be there the day we cut that ribbon to reopen it. It's just going to take some time. The state is looking at some potential municipal reforms for different local option taxes. No idea where they're going to go, but I think the Commonwealth is aware of the challenges that cities and towns facing. We really can't complain about the Student Opportunities Act. They really did commit to funding additional education. Kudos to the city of Brockton, because ed reform came about because Brockton sued the state, and the Student Opportunities Act candidly came about because Brockton was threatening to sue the state again. So I don't know if we just need to call Bob Sullivan in Brockton and say, can you do it twice in a decade, because we could use some help. But there's some potential benefits there as well. So big challenges, but a lot of big important things happening.
Thank you. When we look at this total budget, it has like the line items and totals by department, but it doesn't have a complete total. And so we will want to see that and how that compares to the number that we talked about at budget balancing.
I'll check and make sure and see what the discrepancy
I did it a
might
couple
be.
of times because I was like,
Okay,
I
we'll look
wanted
into
to
it.
make sure. The other thing is, and I just as an overall comment, I mean, you're seeing the same pressure from salaries. I mean, it's going up more than 2.5%. It's a very simple mathematical equation. So you're having the same pressure on the town government side as they're having on the school side. I mean, town salaries in general, they just can't. They go up more than 2.5%. So it is a mathematical problem, correct? I mean, you're seeing the same type of.
Yeah, generally, COLAs have run 2 to 3%, and then it depends on what else is in the contract. I want to say 3 years ago we did a 1, and then the prior settlement it was 3.33. Then we did a 1 as a stutter step, and then it was 1s and 2s. You're probably looking at 2.5s as an average, probably closer to 3 depending on how it works out. And again, one day I'd like to do the math on the delta of booking everyone at the full step. It's probably more than we could ever afford. But if you did that, you could say, well, the salary increase is 2.75%, so that's all your budget really needs to go up is 2.75%. Instead, you're playing the game with steps and COLAs and who has longevity this year.
Right.
We are trying to simplify some of our contracts where, if for no other reason, for retro pay, for just making budgeting easier, that there's less additional pays, there's less extra pays, and it's like, look, instead of paying you $50,000 plus $5,000 for walking into the job in the morning, we're just going to pay you $55,000. But sometimes there's an impact on overtime with those, sometimes there's not, so we have to be careful. There's a couple more corrections with those we have to make at the fire department that we couldn't do this time to just try to streamline some of that.
So sustainability is, you can't forever cut your operating expenses to offset.
You'd be surprised, but.
You don't want to.
No, you don't. That's a Prop 2.5.
We used to when we don't want to go back.
On the one hand, Prop 2.5 doesn't work. On the other hand, it's worked in one function or another since the early 80s. Right prior to Prop 2.5, the country was going through a lot of inflation, and employees were getting 6 and 7% increases. We just can't do that.
Right.
So the committee has received the shared expenses budget as well. Excuse me. So if anyone, since we just got that this afternoon, I think, if anyone has any questions about that, please email me and I'll pass it on through. Okay. And then it's not officially listed on our agenda for Thursday night, but we could either tack it on to our meeting at the end of March, or I think a lot of these things it's more questions. There's not as much discretion as what to do in this budget. Right. So it could be something that we get to the details on our April 8th meeting. Is that when that is?
Yes, Monday, April 8th.
Yes.
If you could get me the questions I may not be able to be here Thursday. I will let you know for sure. We might have to just take Jeff's training wheels off, and he may have to run the whole kit and caboodle. But I'm balancing between two things, and I don't know if I'll be able to make both.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm okay continuing to talk because I don't have to go upstairs. So. I too love the joys of liquor and car licensing.
Are there any other questions now?
I mean, the only question I have on the shared cost budget is the derivation of the costs for Blue Hills, but we're gonna be talking with them on Thursday.
That is certainly fair game for the
Yeah.
conversation on Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a little nervous that they haven't settled their contracts yet. And because it's formula-based, it can just have a weird impact where if they're projecting 3% and they go to 4%, what does that actually, it's not just an additional percentage in the total cost to us. Because of the way the formula works, it could have an issue.
Well, a lot of it
Okay.
relates to the number of kids, from the
Well,
different.
but that-
Yeah,
what I'm
and that's,
saying,
that was
yeah.
cut off here, so I don't even know how many
Yeah.
kids are being added.
Yeah.
So our student count with Blue Hills is flat this year.
Yeah.
But the problem is, flat's not always good depending on how everyone else goes up and
I
down,
got
and
you.
your relative size to the whole thing. Which is why, again, if they said, hey, our budget's actually 1% higher, it may mean less. It may mean a heck of a lot more than 1% for us, which is, a concern.
Okay. All right, so
All
we'll
right.
talk to Blue Hills on Thursday, we'll talk to facilities on Thursday. We're getting through this budget. All right, any further questions from the FinCom? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, everyone.
And Christine, if you would not mind reading the hearing.
DCD Assistant Controller Bill Cava submitting request to change the DBA for DCD NTY to new car new to you, 1201 Boston Providence Turnpike, Norwood, Massachusetts.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome, Mr. McGilvery. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Just want to name the change from Bach new to you to new car new to you.
Okay, and in terms of everything being in line, we're good?
Yes.
That's really it.
Okay.
No, just, we'll just open it up to questions or comments from the board.
Make a motion to approve. Oh. You have something?
Yeah, so this is a
okay.
public hearing. Do we have any other questions, comments from the board?
So this is one dealership?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, great.
Any cars for sale now?
always.
All right. Motion to close the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion made to close the public hearing, seconded by Mr. Donnelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Sad.
Motion to approve. Let's keep the ball rolling.
Motion approved made by Mr. Sad, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll coordinate?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good night.
Okay. Next, we have an appointment with Mr. Paul Riccardi and Mr. Chris Follen from the Facilities Department.
And Mary O'Brien.
And Mary, hi, sorry. Welcome. Feel free to sit right up here. Our esteemed town manager is still finishing up with the Finance Commission, so the floor is yours.
All right.
Happy to have you here. I know there was some scheduling issues last time, so we're glad you're here.
Right. Thank you very much. So as we sit here today, we're actually in our 4th year of existence with the Facilities Department. And if we look at, I think you guys got maybe the pie charts that we did. If we look at a 4-year total, we work on a work order system. It's called School Dude, and all of the buildings can fill out their repairs that they need or requests. And we've done about 5,000 work orders in the 4 years. And that breakdown is staying at about 80% for the schools and 20% for the town buildings. That doesn't count any projects we do. So like we did the men's room downstairs, that's not in School Dude. any other renovations. I gotta say, while we're here, that, and I'm gonna be Chris Folan to this, that, you know, the 7 guys that we have, tradesmen and their helpers, do an unbelievable job under the day-to-day direction of Chris. And I've been here working for the town now 12 or 13 years, and I can honestly say I have never gotten one complaint from any of our customers that the guys have been disrespectful, rude, or not respecting someone's space. They leave it better than when they went in there. So it is a real testament to our guys, and they're willing to do everything. Just because you're the electrician doesn't mean when there's a flood, it's not all hands on deck. So it's really a credit to the town of Norwood and the folks that we have working. Just a couple of small projects that we finished the women's locker room at the Civic, and if you have a chance to go in there, we were smart. We had the ladies at the Civic pick out the colors instead of us guys. And but if you walk in there, it's as nice as a locker room in a private gym. We are working on we'll start in July, the facade repair for the Civic. That's basically doing a lot of limestone, and the delay in that job is getting the limestone, but it's going to be coming in late spring, I think, so it should be wrapped up by early fall. I'm happy to say all of the projects that we're working on are coming in on budget or under budget. And if you look at the second page of the pie chart, you can see by building, and the high school leads the way in work orders and repairs, and 2 reasons. It's our biggest building, it's got the most people in there every day, and it's 13 years old, so things are starting to need replacement. But it's still in great shape. And I would be remiss just not to also mention our custodians, because when you walk into any of our buildings, no matter how old they are or how new they are, they basically all look the same. They're all in good shape. So as I give credit to our maintenance guys, the custodians are just as important. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. Yeah, as Paul was saying, we're only as good as our team. And the guys in our one gal, Linda, who's in this building, they do an unbelievable job. From the custodians, like Paul said, to the core maintenance guys that go around and do the actual repairs to all the buildings. And they're on time every day, and they come in with a good attitude, and we get stuff done. And we have a good time when we're doing it. So I meet the guys at the shop, the 8 facilities craftsmen, at the shop at 6 o'clock up at the Savage Center, and we distribute the work for the day, and off they go. And any emergencies that crop up, the school dude system I get in real time on my phone, and can dispatch the guys. We have a radio system if there's emergencies to go here, there, and wherever they have to go. Paul and I oversee some of the capital projects and other projects that are going on. We have, I think, 3 schools left, maybe 4. Right. All the buildings in town, with the exception of a few areas in this building, we've done the LED retrofits and the lighting, all the exterior lights here. All the exterior lights on all the buildings in town have been done. We have 4 elementary schools that are left. We have 1 on the docket to do in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get them all done before the summer break is over. So all the classroom lights, hallway lights, all the lights in the buildings will be LED, which is great. The police and fire job is coming out great. That HVAC project, that's rolling along without a hitch, knock on wood. So far, so good. So we're doing the next lift, they're doing the next lift down there Saturday? I believe it's this week. So, and as Paul said, the Civic Center, I read emails this afternoon that the stone is going to be arriving. Some of the change orders they had on that within the next month, so that's going to get going. So all in all, it's good. It's a good time to come to work. It doesn't seem like it's like a burden. It doesn't seem like it's a job when you can come in and the guys are there in the morning and they're smiling and they're happy, and you go and you see the kids in the schools and stuff, and it's a good thing. So, and I will say, even though Mr. Mizuko's not here, he did have a big part in us getting this department off the ground, and we told him, let us pick the team, let us get the core guys of those 8 facility guys, and he backed us all the way, and that's been a success of this department, so. And of course, I would be very remiss if I didn't say it all starts in the office with Mary and Cindy. Everything goes up the office through them, and they take care of so much stuff and make it easy for us, so we're a good
They
team.
come into crying, she tells them, get up.
Works that way.
So, all
So
yours,
if you have any financial questions, Mary can answer them.
I did send the report. We encumber a lot of the monies up front. Just makes it a lot easier when we do get the bills in to pay them faster, to get the money back to the vendors, because since we only send checks out once a week, it's faster that way. So it looks like we spent a lot of money already, but we actually haven't because it's encumbered. So hopefully, we did great last year, and hopefully this year we'll do good again, and won't be asking for any money or anything like that. I think we should be able to hit it on be good for this year.
No reserve fund transfers.
No.
Yes.
Right.
No.
one of the things that Paul and I were discussing just today, as you bring it up, Mr. Donnie, the Coakley Middle School is literally limping to the finish line.
That's right.
We've had problems for the past month with the walk-in freezer down there. I got a call over the weekend that was acting up again. We put some money into that, and we're putting bigger Band-Aids and more baling wire on everything down there.
Just don't turn on the AC.
To get it to the end, yeah. So we're gonna do our best to get it there. We do have a plan, if we do have to buy equipment and stuff, that we will get stuff that we can, when it comes time to take that building down, we're gonna take that equipment that's usable and put it in our garage and earmark it for
Sure.
replacement somewhere else, so we have talked about that, so hopefully we get through.
Great. So we'll open it up to the boards for any questions, comments, but I'll just personally say, last week we had parent-teacher conferences. One of my kids goes to the Cleveland, place looks great. I know it's an older building. My wife, she teaches in Newton at a school that's a little bit older than the Cleveland, and she said it doesn't compare, meaning Cleveland's a lot better shape, so. And I always appreciate, the Savage gets a ton of use
Oh, yeah.
with all the sports, and I know that, you guys are doing a really good job, so it's very much appreciated.
So just as a follow-up, we're gonna put a huge burden on 3 of our schools this summer because the Coakley is closed because of the phase of construction that they're in. It's actually gonna be closed the next 2 summers, so it's gonna be quite a challenge to get the schools, Cleveland School particularly, because they're gonna have over 200 kids in there this summer for 8 weeks, and the summer is 10 weeks.
Right.
And that's
So-
usually when you do your heavy work.
Yeah,
Right.
so, exactly, so
Right.
it's gonna be a challenge, but we'll get it in the best possible shape.
Yeah, it feels like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Mr. Sad?
Great job, you all 3 of us, I know you all, and I know you do a great job for the town of Norwood. I coached Chris's daughter and a few other people in hockey and everything else. Great season.
Thank you.
Tough loss.
Yeah, it was a tough
Oh, that was heartbreaker. But great staff. I know most of the guys and gals down there, and keep up the great work. Just one thought. I know with this potential 3A, has anybody looked at, I don't know, Bob or the committee else later, possibly leaving that gym there and utilize that for future expansion?
The
and use
gym
for-
at the Coakley?
Yeah.
Um,
Something we can look at maybe at some point?
We can take a look. I'm not sure that you'll get the answer that you want, because it's besides the gym, you'd have to have ventilation, heating, you don't have to have cooling in.
Yeah, the rest
That
of the building comes down
system,
to now supplying that.
right, that system is really, if the HVAC system at the Coakley, Bill will remember this, was supposed to be replaced 15 or 18 years
I was on
ago.
that committee, yep.
And it's kept being put off for other building projects. So it would be very expensive, Mr. Sat, to save that, try to save that gym from a construction point of view and from an HVAC point of view.
Well, my only thought was, and I know we talked about the moving the Ivots house down, was maybe taking a front portion of that cafeteria and making that the snack shack?
Yeah, we've already have a concession stand in the plans within the existing budget of the new Coakley Middle School.
All right,
And it's gonna be in the parking lot near the tennis courts.
okay. Well, maybe we can get together at some
Yep,
point.
okay.
But keep up the great job, and I thank you, and
All right.
Next season, get him hot, coach.
Yeah, we will.
I just also want to say, Chris is a new grandfather.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
We didn't
As
know
a matter of
that.
fact, it was Heather that you coached that
Yep.
had a baby over the weekend, so a little girl.
Good, congratulations.
Good, thank you.
That's
Thanks.
great. Ms. Grubb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming in to see us. We really appreciate it, and also really appreciate all the hard work that you're all doing. Only small question I had was, we talked a little bit about the, orders of magnitude more requests that we get at the high school, just the nature of it being a bigger building, and are there any tips you have for the general public or for students that help, lower the need for requests?
Well, I think it's equipment starting to wear out. And not so much, because if you walk through the high school, when we bring people in there, they can't believe the place is 13 years old.
Yeah, it looks great.
And, I've been saying since day one, well, year two, actually, when I started, it's kind of like the Disney World effect. If you build something really nice, your customers help maintain it. And the kids, if you think about there's 1,000 kids up there, the kids have done a great job. We've had some issues, but by and large, they help keep that place looking the way it is.
Great. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, no further questions from me tonight.
Great.
Mr. Plasko?
Thank you. I'm thrilled to hear the reports. I'm here, thrilled to speak to some of the people in the buildings, that they're thrilled with the service they're getting. Like you say, your customers are all happy, and that's my experience as well. I know you guys are right on top of everything. I only look at those buildings, particularly the schools, from outside, but as Paul knows, I walk around with my dog, I walk in and I call him, sees a broken window, the light's hanging off the side wall, so he knows I bother him when I'm out there, but I look at those windows and those buildings are all glistening, they're all beautiful. So you do a great job. I've also been able to interact with a couple of your staff members, and like you say, they're all top-notch, they're all friendly, they're all willing to do whatever they have to for the town, and they do their job. Even if they're not smiling on the outside, they sure are. So we appreciate everybody's effort and how successful this has been. I think we started this wanting to have a townwide at least 13 years ago, 15 years ago. And we had people down from Andover and failed, and finally with Mr. Hajar. And I think the big change was that we had a change in manager and superintendent. That was with assembling blocks before. But I think now that we got through that logjam and have it up and running, it's proved to be what we said it would be way back then. Thanks for everything.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you. Well, working with 5,000 work orders over a 5-year period is pretty impressive. So, how big is your team?
8 guys.
8 people. Yeah. Is it pose any challenges with your work? Do you have a backlog, or you find yourselves being able to get through them fairly?
I'm going to let Chris.
Yeah, we prioritize, obviously by needs, classrooms first, and then pretty much everything else. And if there's problems in the restrooms in those buildings, that is a priority. So are we backlogged? Yeah, there's some, what's a wish and what is a need, so, and what's a big expense and what can we just keep doing off the cuff, so. But I wouldn't say that there's a big backlog, but there's a few things that we've put on the back burner, so to speak. But we keep up.
Good.
Yeah. Well, they do. We don't do much. We pass it off to them. They're a great group.
So one of the maintenance challenges I've heard you address is the Coakley with the closure coming up. I love the bar chart you have here on the work order by building, on the public safety building. It's kind of high on that list too. Is it, if the HVAC is completed, do you expect maybe you'll see fewer work orders from, are most of the work orders at that building associated with the HVAC, or is there other issues that you've been attending to?
I think most of it is HVAC.
HVAC and plumbing.
Right, so hopefully,
With the
the
overhaul,
expectation is they should be greatly reduced.
and you'll see a smaller bar
Right,
chart next
right,
time.
right.
That's great, good. Thank you very much. My last question was, and I think this is more of a capital outlay, Paul, but we have a roofing study that's ongoing, or is it?
It's completed.
Okay.
It was done in 2 phases.
Mhm.
They did a inspection, maintenance, and repairs in the spring, and then they came back in the fall after the leaves were down and did it again. And with all the rain,
Yeah.
I can say it was successful. We didn't have very many leaks. And we have a booklet now that we can look at and see, lay out a plan for roof replacements going into the future.
1, 3, 5 years, that sort of thing,
Right,
which,
exactly.
based on priority.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had.
Great. Anything else, or?
I would just like to say one thing, and, you know, in most towns, there's kind of like unsung heroes. And Alan Slater, if you think about going back to the townwide school study, which I think goes back to 2015, he has been head of those right through now building the Coakley. So he's gonna, by the time the Coakley's done, he's gonna have invested over 12 years in the school department. And that's a lot of hours
Sure.
that he's put in, so.
But it's nice of you to say, Mr. Green. Mr. Rizzuto, you were out at the beginning of this. We got Mr. Riccardi signed another 5-year contract, so we're good.
5, I wanted 10.
They had a few things to say about you, we'll talk about later.
I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to them.
Thank you, just briefly, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if the board knows I was finishing up the Finance Commission meeting downstairs. I had predicted when we put our shared facilities department together, it would be 6 months before we were saying we don't know how we operated without them. I think that happened on July 2nd. So we made it all of 2 days before we just didn't know how to do it. I enjoy every year, I make a point of walking through all of our school buildings with Mr. Riccardi, and I literally do bring out the white glove to try to find something wrong with one of our buildings that I can point out, and we enjoy the good game of it, but the truth of the matter is they do an exceptional job.
That's great.
Well, Mr. Mizuko, we've seen your office, so we doubt you have a white glove.
Touche.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the wait. We
That's
appreciate
okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
You can send the light folks in here. Hi, Mary.
Bye, Paul, Mary.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll take an item out of order because we still have some folks that have been patiently waiting. Superintendent Shaughnessy, welcome.
Thank you.
Do we have enough chairs? Because you can move them around, it's all good.
Yeah, it's
All right, great. Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're talking broadband, and the floor is yours when you are ready, Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm the superintendent of the light department. My name is Kevin Shaughnessy. We have Dan Morrissey, who's the COO, and I think you all know Darrell, who runs the broadband division, and Rich O'Reilly, who's also a broadband manager.
Welcome.
Thank you
for being here.
So the purpose of the meeting is, a couple of years ago, we came to with a feasibility study to run a fiber to the premises option in our system. It was approved. We went to town meeting. We got approval to bond money. I think it was about $14 million. And then everything kind of stopped. We started looking at costs and prices, and things just didn't look good. So we decided to take a step back. We told you that in one of our meetings, that we would continue to look at it, and we would come back to when things looked better. So we have been working. Darrell and his team performed a design so we could actually go out to bid, so we got real prices. We got the bids now. It's been probably a couple of months, or at least a month and a half. The numbers look good, better, slightly better than we expected. In addition, to the numbers looking good, we also were able to put aside a little bit more money in the last 2 years, so that we now have, I think it's about $4 million that we can put towards the project. Slightly better numbers, and it looks like that we won't need to get additional customers. If we just stay where we are with the new system, we'll be able to basically borrow a little bit less. So instead of
I think the total is 9.5 million, so whatever we're able to put aside in the next couple of years. It's all kind of it all depends on the customers. If we have less customers, then the cost will be less. If we have more customers, the cost will be a little bit more. But that's good. Having more customers would be a good thing. It would just probably mean we have to borrow a little bit more upfront. I know we gave you the memo from Tom Ash from Power System Engineering. He was the one that did the original study, 20 odd years ago, probably 23 or 4 years ago. He did the study a couple of years ago, and then he updated it for you guys. I think you should have it in your packet. It's kind of a synopsis of what I just said. And if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them. I will say this, walking around the building today, a lot of people really pumped up. They're hoping for a go forward. They really want to get this going, and I think we're going to be very successful with this. I really do. They've been waiting now for quite a while to get going on this. No one wanted to really upgrade the existing, hybrid fiber coax system. Not that we couldn't do it, we could. It's just we want to set ourselves up for another 20 years. And this is, we set this system up. I'll go back to some of you remember Malcolm McDonald, who was the superintendent, maybe 10 years ago. He passed away. But Malcolm, when he planned out the system, he built it so that we could do this. So we learned from Braintree Light kind of what, I don't want to say what not to do, but we went the next step, and we built fiber deep into the neighborhood so that we could do what we want to do now. So, and these guys will be the ones to answer any technical questions.
Great, so we can open it up to the board, we can open it up to the town manager. Does anyone else on your team, Kevin, want to add, or?
It's up to them.
Okay.
No, not really. Thank you, Matt. That covered it well.
Great. Mr. Plasko?
What do you think?
I'm 100% behind it. I was going to be behind it no matter what. The light department team has done a great job in really going about it thoughtfully, waiting until numbers looked good. And I know Daryl has been sweating over the bid that finally came in, but a lot of work's gone into it. This is the future of our broadband division. And there's no world where not having a broadband division is better off for us.
Yeah, and the longer we wait, the more expensive everything will be.
You teased me out in the hallway on the way in here whether I read the report. And I basically said, no, I took a match to it. I don't have it tonight, but not because I didn't take a match to it. I think when I took it out to read it, I didn't put it back in my pack. So I did read it. And I didn't clearly understand all of it. Some of the reading that I was doing, it seemed to side that they were being cautionary about it being kind of risky. You're not afraid of that risk? You think you have a handle on everything?
Yeah, so the three options.
I mean, there's a
of
risk
this,
in everything.
Well, the three
a
options.
reasonable, fair risk that you're ready to conquer.
It's less risky now than it was 2 years ago. That being said, it would have been hard for us to get an additional 1,500 customers. Now it looks like we can just keep our existing amount of customers and do okay. I will let you know that there is a little bit built into this that we try and be conservative, just like we are on the electric side. The number that we use for borrowing is 5%. I talked to Alex, our treasurer, the other day. He said it would probably be closer right now to 3.25%. So I reran the numbers again, not that it's in your packet, it isn't, at 4%, and it would be $1 million less over the 20 years. Probably it wouldn't be 4%. I'm thinking it would be a little bit less. When we meet with you for the budget, I have some other ideas about interfund transfers, which we did years ago, not at this scale, between electric and broadband. So obviously we'd have to have a schedule and there'd have to be a return on it, but it would be less than what we would borrow for. Again, that's another positive that we would be able to the numbers would be better. We wouldn't need as many customers if that is the case, that we had to step back, raise the price a little bit, and then maybe we would lose, a few customers. In addition to that, there's also money being carried for the full 20 years for franchise fees. Now, once we get out of cable TV in the next, say, 3 years or so, you wouldn't be obligated to pay those. However, we carried them knowing that there was at least in my impression, there was the board wanted us to do that. In other words, and it would be discretionary. You wouldn't have to do that, but as you know, Norwood Community Media is a big part of our town, and we don't support them. That probably means at some point Comcast and Verizon could also be getting out of the traditional cable TV business. So there's another, if you multiply that over 20, it's a couple hundred thousand, another $4 million.
And you've been pushing the DirecTV stuff and things like that.
We've been doing that, yes. There's a few other things that could save us some money. So I'm confident that the risk is minimal. The person that we use, Tom Asp, is fairly conservative. You saw it. He said we could sell the business, we could continue on the way we are, but this was the best option, and I'm very confident that we're gonna kill it.
We already have the authorization, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pasco.
No, everything they touch turns to gold, so I'm all with them. Good luck, guys, gals, and you got our support, my support.
Ms. Grow.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in tonight. I thought the report was great, all the details I was interested in. Small question I had, I'm in favor of it, and one of the things it reiterated was, not being able to use cable as a loss leader anymore. Do we have any opportunities for different types of loss leaders that we're eyeballing on the horizon, or are we still kind of not really finding another way to do a loss leader style
For video,
method?
you mean?
Just for anything.
For anything. The telephone, it was never a leader, but it too is declining. Commercial, it may never go away. Businesses need phones, right? So, and that market has actually been growing. Residential has been dropping off, and businesses have been growing in the phone business. So if there's any potential loser going forward, might be residential phone.
But that's my only question. Everything looked great. I think the options that were presented were all very reasonable and well articulated. So I agree with the recommendation.
Mr. Donnelly.
These was a really interesting report, so thank you for forwarding it to us. And as Mr. Ask does recommend going forward with the project, and I think we're all in agreement with that. He does outline, and you've addressed it a moment ago, Mr. Shaughnessy, one of them, what a number of conditions that we should keep our eye on going forward with FTTP. So when we talk about exiting the cable market in the next 3 to 5 years, is there a plan in terms of how we do that? I'd be interested in just learning just how do we go about doing that? What activities does the town need to invest in to exit the business, so to speak?
Well, so Selectman Donnelly, the plan now is to go into neighborhoods. They're already started, really. They have up in my neighborhood. They haven't hooked me up yet, but maybe in the near future they will. But so we'll go into a neighborhood. We'll start to build out the neighborhood, and then we'll look to do installs. So in that neighborhood, when we go to talk to people, we're going to give them the option to go with the fiber. I don't think initially we'll say, if you don't, we're going to disconnect the ours. But at some point when we get out of the business, we'll have to do that in 3 years. And that's the thing to look at. If we start going into neighborhoods 2-3 years from now and people aren't taking our service, then we'll have to stop and think about what that really means and what other alternatives. Right now, we have a deal with DirecTV. Not a lot of people are taking advantage of it yet. But, we haven't marketed it, really. So when we go into a neighborhood and say, look, this is what it looks like, let us show you. It's going to be a little bit cheaper. Darryl could talk much better about this. But it's an option that looks very similar to our cable TV. For our typical, I think we skew towards a more senior group. And, because younger people, they're fine with streaming. And we could have, like Darryl, I think, was going to talk about some over-the-top services. But we're not quite there yet. But if we were to be able to offer some, the DirecTV and show people that it looks very similar. You have a box, you have a clicker, it's not going to be much different. Is he shaking his head or not? I can't tell.
Probably a better service, because we haven't done an upgrade on our video services for many years now.
Yeah.
So anything else that we can show them, either a DirecTV or some other over-the-top service, is going to be better than the services they have now. They may have to pay that part of the bill to somebody else, but it'll be a better service. So we'll try to teach customers that there is a better service out there.
And in the end, we have there's about 10 employees in the broadband side, Mr. Donnelly, and as we get out of cable TV to attrition, we won't be replacing some people. We just won't need them. We don't, the system, the fiber system that we plan on installing will not need the level of maintenance that we do now. So those several positions will also help us in the future.
What about in terms of customer service in sort of, are we well equipped for that, for the transition?
Sure, yeah, the manpower is gonna be fine. As Kevin said, over time, once the HFC plant, the old plant goes away,
Yep.
it is very high maintenance, especially as it gets older. Fiber is very little maintenance. It's really an active piece on one end and an active piece on the other end. There's nothing in between. That could, well, anything can go bad, but there's no active devices in the middle that's gonna break in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody hits a pole, it's, you know, it's always a risk we take, but
That's great.
it should be much lower maintenance. Customer service, as you know, we're
We have great customer service.
great customer service and pride ourselves now. We'll continue doing that.
That's great. I didn't mean to jump on
No, that's
there.
no problem. No, not for tonight, but, you know, I would be interested in learning more about the conditions that Mr. Apps put in here, the business plan for each segment of the market, commercial, residential, and enterprise. But I think the important line for me in his summary is, I don't think that Norwood ever got into this business because we wanted to make a lot of money. And I think the business is transitioning reliability, service, but I like the line he has here, that one of the things that this particular project can do is allow Norwood Light Broadband to keep an eye on competitors' focus and attention to Norwood. And I just think that's sort of a sub-benefit to having our own ownership here of the broadband. It does make the other providers make sure that they are providing competitive services and pricing and so forth to Norwood, and I think it's something we don't talk enough about, and I think that's due to the fact that you're running the business very effectively. Thank you very much.
Great. Anything else, Mr. Mizuko? So we don't need a vote, we just...
I mean, not formally, the board, the process has already been approved, but we said we would come back to the board, so
Right.
you could take a motion to approve moving forward.
Yeah, okay. So I will say, do we have a motion to move forward for the borrowing? Do we need to have any kind of language? No, that's already been established. For the migration to fiber to the premises.
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Gross, seconded by Ms. Shadow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. All right, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It is. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Thank
patience
you.
tonight.
This is great.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Let's get started.
Great job. Get the shovels ready. That's right.
Thank you so much. See you, Dan. Okay, that's great. I appreciate your ringing endorsement, Mr. Mizuko. It's a good thing.
It is.
Okay, back to the agenda. Item number 2, warrant signature update, submitting notification of reviewed and approved warrant reports signed by the board's representative. We have a motion to approve.
Approve and file.
Motion to approve and file made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item number 3, meeting minutes for approval of the board, submitting meeting minutes for February 13th, 2024 and February 27th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. New business, item 4.1, one-day liquor permit, Hometown Arcade. Submitting a one-day liquor permit for Hometown Arcade located at 61 Endicott Street, Building 26A, for a 40th birthday party on Saturday, April 13th, 2024, from 7 p.m. until 11 p.m., with approximately 50 guests expected. Do we have a motion to approve? Made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item number 4.2, one-day liquor permit. Hometown Arcade, submitting a one-day liquor permit for Hometown Arcade located at 61 Endicott Street, Building 26A, for a beat-inspired night out on Thursday, March 28th, 2024, 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. with approximately 60 guests expected.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Item 4.3, one-day liquor permit, Castle Island Brewing Company, submitting a one-day liquor permit for Castle Island Brewing Company for a Salvage Angel Marketplace event on April 21st, 2024, at their 31 Astor Avenue location from 12 p.m. until 6 p.m. with no more than 50 to 100 guests at any given time.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor? Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.4, one-day music permit, submitting a one-day music permit from Ryan Connolly for his 60th birthday party to be held at the Chateau Restaurant, 404 Boston Providence Turnpike on April 27th from 5:30 PM until 9:30 PM. They don't have an entertainment license for?
No.
No.
No, we get a couple of the, I wouldn't even say a couple a year, every other, yeah, one or two a year maybe we get. I appreciate their fastidiousness and
Yeah, that's great.
pulling the appropriate permit.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Motion to approve made by Ms. Gross, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor? Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.5, Town Common request. Norwood Junior Women's Club submitting a request to use the Town Common and Bandstand for the annual kids concerts on the following Tuesdays, July 16th, July 23rd, and July 30th, 2024, from 6 PM until 8 PM, with no less than 100 attendees. Expected rain dates requested are Tuesday, August 13th, and Tuesday, August 20th. This doesn't interfere with farmer's market? All right, Christine says no. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Mr. Plasko. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.6, Millville Police Department submitting a request to surplus and recycle a list of items. Mr. Mizuko, this is just the list we get every year.
Correct. Periodically from some departments, other departments, it's once in a great while.
Okay. Do we have
Motion to approve disposal.
Motion to approve disposal of surplus items from the police department made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.7, 4th of July Celebration Committee, light bill insert, submitting a request from the 4th of July Celebration Committee to insert a flyer for into an upcoming light bill requesting donations for the 4th of July celebration.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Mr. Plasko. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.8, Norwood Recreation Department Glow-in-the-Dark Egg Hunt, submitting a request to hold the Glow-in-the-Dark Easter Egg Hunt on Thursday, March 28th, 2024 at 7 PM for less than an hour at Shattuck Park.
I will make a motion to approve.
Motion approved made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Mr. Sad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Any leftover eggs may be found by Mr. Plasko's dog the next day.
Excellent.
Good one. Item 4.9, cemetery deeds for signature of the board.
Motion to sign.
Motion to sign made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.10, warrant for town election for signature of the board. Town clerk Mary Lou Folin submitting the warrant for town election.
I
Motion to
just
sign.
skipped that one.
Make a motion to sign the warrant.
Motion to sign the warrant made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Item 4.1, we already took up. 4.12, FY 25 general government budget, facilities budget for discussion. Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just did our joint meeting with the Finance Commission on the FY25 general government budget. Just put this on here as a placeholder in case the board wanted to take a vote tonight or at your next meeting, or if you had any questions or wanted to have any discussion, or if there's anything I can look into for you.
Okay. Thoughts on this, Mr.
Enough time to
Plasko?
do this at the next meeting?
Yes, as long as there's not substantial changes coming. We're looking to try to close the budget book by the end of the month, and I think I can make your next meeting work if you want to hold.
Yeah, no, I had made a couple little notes that just kind of quiz on, probably not significant, probably would make any changes. But
Yeah. Okay, so.
We can have it on your next agenda, and if you just have any questions in the meantime, just be sure to get them to me so we can get them answered and resolved.
Is that okay with you,
Up
Mr.
until
Donnelly?
then.
Mr. Shad, that's okay with you?
Sure.
Okay, great. So we'll take up the facilities budget at our next meeting on the 26th, right?
Sounds right.
Correct.
Okay, great. Item 4.13, liquor license availability for discussion.
I just placed this on there, Mr. Chairman, to let the board know, we are out of liquor licenses, I should say pouring licenses. And if at some point you want to consider whether trying to approach the legislature for more or doing it on a case-by-case basis, which can become difficult if you get 6 requests in a 3-month period, but more just for discussion that we have 3 businesses that have looked at 1 license, but we are full up. So, no recommendation other than just putting it there for
Ms. Grow.
discussion.
Thank you.
Question, how do we compare to our neighboring communities on that front? Is it unusual to be out, or is this kind of everybody's in the same place right now?
No,
Based on population.
Yeah, there's two ways that it's calculated. One is there's a census population, so we went up when the census went up recently, and then it's plus whatever special licenses you've gotten. It's rare that towns have a lot of licenses available. It's rare that you have more than one or two available because they tend to have quite a bit of value. Unless it's a town that has some restricted development where there's water or sewer or other issues that they're not able to have them. The legislature has been challenging in some ways to grant, they don't just grant a lot of liquor licenses. Usually they want a special purpose or a special district, which we've done. Our challenge is we sort of have South Norwood, Route 1, and downtown. So the three areas we would want licenses in are the whole town for all intents and purposes.
Right.
It's not a guarantee. That being said, is it holding back economic development? I think if we had 5 more for downtown, you might see some more restaurants downtown. But the problem is you don't want to you also set a boundary and you say, well, this is downtown and we have 5 licenses available. And then somebody happens to want to build on Route 1 because it works for them. It's like, well, we don't have a license for Route 1. So there's no easy answer, and there's no, other than the census allocation, there's no metric by which cities and towns are given them. Candidly, the city of Boston has gotten quite a bit of favor from the legislature in recent years with the overwhelming number they've gotten for certain districts, that has not been extended to cities and towns, but.
They've had
According
problems
to the
too.
Boston Globe, they're worth 600,000.
Right.
I'm generally opposed to it. The idea of pursuing
more.
We still have unused beer and wine licenses in downtown and South Norwood. We've had some applications, but we've also found them not suitable, turned them down. So just because people are asking for them doesn't mean they're the right type of establishments. We picked up, I forget what the exact number is, but we picked up several this last census. And now all but one, and that one's in limbo, have been distributed or are out there in use. We're a small 10 square miles community. I don't know where else you're gonna put them on top of each other. And the other thing is the reality of dealing with the legislature. The last few times we've been looking for applications, manager alluded to it, they're looking for a purpose. You're gonna go to the Skating Club of Boston and it's an economic development, you can sell that. If you have legacy place like a Dedham coming in and they wanna be able to attract a bunch of restaurants to fill that in, they see that and they'll give you some. And what they're doing is they're saying, you can have 5 for 5 years. If you don't get them out, if you don't get them distributed or licensed, out to license holders, they come back. So they don't want a lot of licenses out there, the people that have been in charge of the process. That can change every year, but right now, I just don't see that it's really appropriate or worth the effort myself.
And I know that, several of the licenses that we awarded, we're kind of waiting on a few things.
We do have 1 or 2 applicants or license holders that I think the board's gonna need to schedule, if not a show cause, a meet and greet to find out when they intend to open.
Yeah, and I did speak with one of those
Yeah, so that makes a couple available.
Right, and I did speak with one of those businesses, and, they explained sort of their situation. I think we would all be probably sympathetic to what they're trying to do, and, but, we that's one of our charges too, is to make sure that the ones that we awarded are working for the town. And so the longer that we go without, and this happened a couple times during COVID, Mr. Sad, just for, your edification, is that, it was kind of not a gray area, but we had a few that people hadn't really been utilizing because their restaurants were closed for a certain period of time. So I think now we're sort of back to normal times, and we should get back on track with really kind of holding these establishments to some set of standards.
Just thank you for that, being a newcomer. Is there so many allocated for South Norwood, Uptown, Route 1?
No, there are in the special beer and wine licenses that we applied for specifically for those areas. But the general alcohol and beer, all alcohol and beer and wine licenses are just townwide. It just depends on where we end up giving them out to.
Yeah, when I mentioned the 3 sort of commercial areas in town, the legislature is rarely in recent years granted just an increase. So we gotta say, well, we want a couple more liquor licenses for this
The
area.
Space Center, for example.
Right, or you can try to do like an economic area, but the problem is, are we gonna say we want 2 for downtown and 1 for South Norwood, 4 for Route 1, 3? We don't, most towns might have one area that they want them and it's a little bit easier. We would want more general flexibility, but the legislature generally doesn't grant that.
Okay.
Yep, good question. Anything else in this, Mr. Donnelly?
My opinion at this point would be, let's try to get updated as much as we can with the 2 that have issued and are not being utilized right now, and
And the one in limbo. So that's
yes,
potentially
potentially
three.
3.
Right.
And hopefully through those conversations, the people who have been issued those licenses will hasten to start their processes, to start utilizing them, and if they're not, maybe we have to bring them in for a discussion.
Right.
Go
And
that
it-
route first.
And it's funny because it's not, I've learned, it's really not an exact science because we gave one license, this was a liquor store. Before they opened up, they never opened up, they sold it, and we don't have to rehash that, but it's like, some of these establishments, the 2 in particular that we're talking about, they're really putting in a lot of money into,
Just taking forever.
yeah, it's just taking a long time, so it's not apples to apples in terms of like how we look at it.
Yeah, and it's challenging too, because for a business, it's, when do you get the license? You don't want to invest $1 million and get right up to the
Right.
construction, and then there's no license available. You need to know you're having the license, that it's gonna work, but then what if you have an 18-month construction period? So there is,
And that's what this article that Mr. Plasko was talking about in the Globe, that's what they're talking about, these like huge projects, and then you have to spend an additional $500,000 to get a liquor license.
the governor did say at the start of the MMA convention that she was submitting a bill for local control of liquor licenses, promptly pulled it out of the bill 3 days later. So I don't think there's gonna be any change there anytime soon.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the quickest turnarounds in history.
All right, well, thank you for bringing that up, though. Item 4.14, late agenda item, Conservation Commission signage, Coldwater Fishery Brooks. Carly Rockland submitting request to place 5 6x6 signs along the Germany Trapple and Purgatory Brooks for the Neponset River Watershed Association, 2 at Trapple Brook, 1 at Purgatory Brook, and 2 at Germany Brook. This is a grant-funded project.
Motion to approve the request for signage at those locations indicated on there, or on the memo.
Motion to approve made by Mr. Donnelly, seconded by Mr. Sad. On the motion? Did you have
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Did they forget about the Hosbrook? Great fishing hole down there. But either way, just maybe.
Yeah, no, we can ask,
Yeah.
sure.
Take a look into that.
Yep.
Give it a little publicity.
Okay, was that a second?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Christine, we'll make a note to check in on that. Excellent. Item 4.15, general obligation municipal purpose loan of 2024 bonds. Town treasurer and collector Alex Haggerty submitting for signature of the board.
Have some language now.
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
just to tee it up, Mr. Chairman, you have some language you'd like to read. We brought to the board a few weeks ago the potential of refinancing some of our bonds. The treasurer was successful in doing that, getting a fairly low rate. We'll probably save $15,000 to $20,000 a year, averaging, but over the life of these bonds, he was able to refinance. It's over $400,000 savings for the town, so.
Okay, great.
We already voted on that,
Yeah.
though, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
so we voted to go ahead and basically go out to market, and this
Yeah.
is just the authorization that's needed to vote to complete the process.
Got it, okay. So, I make a motion to move to authorize the treasurer to issue refunding bonds pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 21A, in accordance with the treasurer's memo of March 12th, 2024, and to incorporate such into this vote.
Second. I'll move whichever way you like.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Second, motion made by Mr. Plasko, seconded by Mr. Donnelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Great. Is that, we're good there, Tony?
Yes, sir,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Good
Sorry.
work by the treasurer.
Thanks. Thank you to Alex. Memoranda.
Motion to file for information unless anyone has anything they want to flip to the top.
Second.
Motion to file memorandum made by Ms. Gross, seconded by Mr. Plasko. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimous. Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 items I'd like to just bring to the board's attention and to the public to an extent, both related to the Norwood Police Department. First, I think as everyone knows, there was an incident at the Coakley School over the weekend. Norwood Police worked throughout the weekend, putting in a lot of hours to come to a resolution to that issue. I think as we know, there was a threat at the Coakley, but I want to point out that in essence, our detectives had the individual or knew who it was in under 2 hours. And the phenomenal level of work that they put into protecting the community and getting to the bottom of this. Sometimes, as everyone knows, we can't always release information right away, and we can't always release everything we know. but Norwood Police did an exceptional job, and our detective division really went above and beyond, and folks should rest easy at night knowing that we have them there protecting us, and I just can't compliment them enough for how quickly and how professionally they were able to handle an incident that certainly brought a lot of fear and anxiety to a lot of people, so kudos to them. And related to the police department, I am pleased to announce, we issued the information earlier today, that I have appointed Chris Padden, currently our deputy police chief, as the next chief of police for the town of Norwood. As you know, Deputy Chief Padden has served us for about 28 years. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy. He is a Marine Corps veteran and served combat tours in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and is also a licensed and practicing attorney. He will begin his time with us as chief on May 1st. There will be a swearing-in ceremony in Memorial Hall, in which the Board of Selectmen's presence is both requested and required to be there for that event.
What's the date?
May 1st, Memorial Hall.
That's great. Congratulations to Deputy Chief Padden, now Chief Padden, or soon to be Chief?
Soon to be Chief Padden.
Great.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Sad.
A couple things. I want to congratulate Ollie and Helen on a great job this weekend on their party for the 80th birthday for Ollie. Great time. His viewers were there. Second is the passing of Elaine Quinn, one of the McDonough families, 102, and condolences to her and the entire McDonough family. And last, Mr. Manager, if you could check on Robin Hood Drive.
Yep.
The water keeps jumping over the Edinburgh Rad's curbing, and it's flooding his house out all the time.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that there's a project in the pipeline for Robin Wood Drive. It's a larger project that's going to take some time.
Perfect. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sad. Ms. Grow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight, what I have is I had some outreach from the State House inquiring if we have any projects that are in the scope of, say, 100,000 that are local projects that we would like to raise to their attention, because they might be able to get us some funds. So if we don't have any off the top of our heads right this nanosecond.
I can send you a very long list
That's what I was
tomorrow
hoping,
morning.
is, at least give me your top 10, and then I could, with the board's permission, bring a list of sort of our punch list that they can then go through and see what they can get for us.
100,000 and below.
Yes, anything 100K or below.
Great. I'm sure,
And
yeah.
obviously the stipulation being it's something that you would be able to do immediately. It's not like, like a revolving fund kind of thing. This is more just a specific project that you would try to use the money all up in one go.
Like a gazebo.
Great. Anything else?
And that's it from me tonight.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Plasko.
I've been thinking and forgetting to bring it up, I believe, and the manager briefly mentioned it earlier tonight when we were talking the budgets, cemetery fees. When are we bringing that back? And we were going to get a little more information and then revisit that.
We can, I can work with you offline to see what the board wants to see before we go ahead and move forward with fees.
I think the only thing we were waiting on, unless somebody's come up with something else at the time, was
I think the board wanted to wait and mull it
perpetual
over.
care and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and with perpetual care, everyone's all over the place. Some of them include it, some of them don't include it.
But we're going to try to find out why and
everyone
what they're
does
doing
it.
instead, those who aren't including it.
So everyone's required to do it. The ones that don't, if they're not including it, it's a separate fee, but there were some of them that we were originally trying to figure out. We couldn't find out what perpetual care was. We spent time calling them, and they said, oh, no, perpetual care is, $200. Well, your fee is $2,000. Yeah, it's included in that. So some of them just charge a flat fee and include it. Nobody really knew some of them had a fee based on it's X percentage of a grade. Nobody had any history or memory in any of the towns we talked to as to why or how
So
their
we just
numbers
have to
got set
decide
where
what
they
we
are.
want to do with ours, all right.
Yeah, we can bring it back on the 24th or 26th if you'd like.
Yeah, next meeting or two, maybe we should get going with it.
Great.
Or after the election.
I think you're safe.
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Is
A
that
lot
it?
of votes at that cemetery.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, so a couple of items. So one of the things I've been working on, I've got some information out to the board members, and I've gotten feedback from you. I'd like to, for the next meeting, bring forward sort of a more formal process out, not so much an outline, but process and forms for a performance evaluation process for the general manager, which has been something I've been working on for several months. So I'd like to get that on the agenda, and prior to that meeting, I'll I'll send out the information that I have developed and gotten some really good input. Just very brief, this is a process where it's pretty much we haven't had Mr. Carroll must have been the luckiest guy in the world for no formal
No
evaluation
contract,
for
no
years.
reviews, no.
Yes.
Almost got fired once.
So we're kind of updating to best practice that I think is good for us. I think it's good for the manager as well. It will prove the ways I believe that we as a board communicate with the management staff, with Mr. Mizuka in particular. Very goals and objective oriented, with a focus mostly on FY25, but where, I think there's been a sense from my conversations with board members that we'd like to perhaps do something, even if it's abbreviated, for the FY24 current year. I'll pull it all together and we'll bring it forward to folks for a specific agenda item for the 26th. So thank you, everybody, for the input that you provided. It's been very helpful. So last week we did roll out the enrollment for the pilot for the curbside compost program, and we had a really good response so far. I think we're just under 200 folks have taken advantage and have gone on the Black Earth website to enroll. There is information on the town page, both on the front page as well as the DPW page, regarding how folks can enroll. It means if you want to enroll in the pilot for the food compost pickup program, which we plan to begin on May 1st, you do need to go on to the Black Earth website. And you'll either that or you can go to the link that's available on their town site. But once you get onto the Black Earth website, if you don't go through the town links, you can go on blackearthcompost.com, and you can enter Norwood as your address under the pricing tab, and that will bring you right to the page which describes the program and how you can enroll in that. Filling up pretty quickly, but we still have room for more folks to sign up. The other thing I just wanted to mention was there is the 2024 rain barrel sale is ongoing, as it was last year. People have until the 14th of April to go online and purchase a rain barrel at a substantially discounted price of $89 from GreatAmericanRainBarrel.com. So go to that site, GreatAmericanRainBarrel.com/communities/Norwood. You can make your purchase there, again at a substantially discounted price. And volunteers are organizing a pickup on the 27th of April at the Cleveland School from 9 to 11, but you have to purchase a rain barrel first. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that. It's a very good program. I actually have two of them, and they work quite well, and I hardly ever have to water the gardens because the barrel always seems to be filled. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. I will just add, we have had an election since our last meeting, and just want to make sure that we recognize Mary Lou and Marcy and Tricia and Emily in the clerk's office. They did a lot of work, and I think we said the turnout was better than we thought, which is great. It's a good sign.
Yep.
But they always do a great job, and I know this is super busy season, got the town election coming up, everything else, and I know that, yes.
Question on that, by any chance if you had a discussion with her, I know she had 2,500 or more people who had returned that they want the mail ballot, and she was a little concerned about that, whether those people would even return them. Do you know how well they did?
I don't. I know for the local election, we're predicting that a lot more people requested them than will return them. I can get the numbers to the board.
Just curious.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that'd be interesting. Good point. Other than that, though, that's it. Thank you. And do we have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Plasko?
Yes.
Seconded by Ms. Grow. All those in favor?
Aye. Yes.
Chair votes aye unanimous. Good night.